Today's budget work session. This is Christian Dorsey, Chair of the County Board presiding, and all board members are in attendance this afternoon. Welcome to the first work session for our FY24 budget cycle. Throughout the course of the next couple of months, we will have an opportunity to engage with various agencies and departments within the county government. And then today, our conversation will focus on the courts and constitutional offices. At each presentation, we will get an understanding of what have been some of the accomplishments in the current fiscal year, and then hear about the budget request, as well as the expected outcomes and opportunities and challenges in fiscal year 24. After each presentation that we have today, and I believe we have 10 in total, board members will have an opportunity to ask questions, and all information about today's work session, as well as the FY24 proposed budget, are available on the budget and finance page of the county's website at arlingtonva.us. So, Mr. Schwartz, my notes say that you are going to orchestrate this whole thing as our maestro, so I'll turn it over to you.
I think somebody's lying to you. The only thing I know is that we're going to start with, I think, one of my favorite people in the world, Judge Louise DiMatteo, is going to come here. And since she gets to go first, she gets all the money.
Would you like me here, there, or outside?
You know what? Whichever chair you get your choice. Your choice is.
And the esteemed Judge Judy Weed. I apologize, I didn't introduce her.
Sit next to my favorite person. Your second favorite person. No, Mark and I have a long history. Actually, I think we all do. I've known you ladies for a long time. Yeah, but you're not getting any details.
All right, so
Occasionally, is it actually on if it's this way? Gotcha.
there we go.
Okay.
Red light means you're on, and your presentation is loaded, so Judge DiMatteo, take us
I
away.
really don't know if I'm going to say too much because we come back to you with the same requests every single time. So we have a very small staff who work with us in chambers and in the drug court, as you're aware. We have 2 employees. Most of our budget is going to be coming from personnel, as you can tell. Other than that, we have some training, we have some supplies, things like this. It's very minimal, as you can see. For drug court, we have very specific requests regarding screening people and, of course, the staff. So we include all of that in there as well on the drug court side. Must it be louder? Okay, there we go. And so really, it's a fairly minimal budget, I suppose, from our point of view. But from your point of view, every penny counts, and I appreciate that as a taxpayer for sure. But these are the same kind of things we ask for every time we see you. I'm happy to answer any questions in case you saw something that deviated from what you were anticipating. But it's kind of think where we were last time, actually, last couple of years. Yeah. So I'm happy to answer any questions. If there are efficiency questions that you might have about performance, obviously the courts function every single day. We take the cases that are given to us. We don't reject any cases. In the drug court world, we are hoping to expand it. Every year we do add a few more people by way of just, I guess, a further explanation of how we work with other jurisdictions. We are currently sharing some participants. We have folks who've come from, I think we have one person from Fairfax currently. We've sent folks to Fairfax and Alexandria as well. The purpose of that is to ensure that folks have the opportunity to have the participation in the program if they don't live in Arlington, or if they live in Arlington but have a case or something pending elsewhere, which means that they couldn't do the drug court in Fairfax or Alexandria. So we've taken on a very responsive approach to trying to resolve the jurisdictional question when it comes to drug court participation, and I think it's been pretty creative, and I think it's been pretty functional, and we've been able to open it up to other people. So I think all of the jurisdictions now locally, Prince William, Loudoun, Fairfax, Alexandria, and Arlington, have a drug court. So we should be able to move people around if there's an issue on that. But anyway, those are my points, but I'm happy to answer anything particular you might have.
Terrific. So we've already got lights up, so why don't we start with Vice Chair Garvey and then Mr. DeFerranti.
Yeah, just a quick question. First, thank you. I mean, I think drug court is one of the most exciting things we're doing. I mean, it's just watching this grow. And actually, that's my question, because I see all these percentages. I'm looking, it's probably here somewhere. I couldn't find it. How many people are we talking about? It's hard.
Currently participating, we have 19. We have 3 awaiting admission, but their cases have to be sort of teed up, if you will, for them to move over. They have one person I know had some cases outstanding in Fairfax that needed to be resolved before they could be admitted.
Great. And then, since I have the mic, one more.
Please.
Thank you. I'm fascinated that we're now cooperating with Fairfax and Alexandria. And I mean, that's great, because I know in the whole how did we solve that? Is that a new thing? Is it new this year or last year?
It's been a few years ago well, first of all, no one other than Arlington had a drug court in the immediate vicinity. When Alexandria came on, I was in communication with Judge Kemmler. She's the chief judge there. And we talked about trying to move people to and fro, and we had to kind of work out venue changes and some statutory things about that. When Judge Ascarati started the drug court in Fairfax, we brought her in and we had a meeting, and we all agreed on a manner in which we could transfer cases, and that's how it went. It was pretty good.
Thank you. I think it's just fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. DeFranti.
Thank you, and thank you, Judge. I appreciate I wonder if you could help a little bit. There's explanations regarding jail days and an effort to decrease the number of jail days used, which we hope will be realized this next year. We went sort of down to 38 and up, and get up a little bit as we moved out of the pandemic, I think, perhaps. Can you give a little sense of the thinking as to and what makes us confident that we'll be coming down in terms of jail days, just in light of lots of conversations over the last 5 years and
If you're talking about jail days associated with participants in drug court, or the alleviation of jail days because they're in drug court, which are you referring to?
Well, there's a mention that sanctions have been used to decrease in sanctions, and so that's the context. I don't know that I've answered your question.
Right. Well, we rarely impose jail days with participants, and that's reserved for the most significant infractions. So it depends on the cohort, and depends on the infraction. So if we have someone who's absconding, if we have someone who's not attending treatment, if we have someone who's been deceptive, we do consider a jail day, and it's brief, maybe even half a jail day, to address the conduct. And then we have more participants in the program, and depending on what phase they're in, could impact the number of jail days overall that you might see in a report. But we rarely impose jail days. The whole point of it is to address it with direct conduct that will meet the participant where he or she is, and also to try to come up with something creative other than a jail day. So we're efforting in that department, definitely, but I think you might be seeing it because we've actually improved the numbers of people in the program, so that could be part of it.
Great. And I have one final question, and that's about fines and fees. It sounds like we've kind of tightened our partnership a little bit to help there's a reference to other organizations that can help pay some of those fines and fees. I'm mindful both that we want there to be a consequence, and also if someone has gainful employment, we want to launch them to a successful future. And so I didn't know if there's a pretty significant increase in fines and fees, but a reference to other organizations, and wanted you to sort of comment on that or see if fees have come down, but we have a better partnership perhaps.
Let me see how I can address that. The individuals have to pay their court costs as pertains to their underlying criminal matters, and they're responsible for that. Most of the people in our drug court program are employed, so they do pay it off, which is super. Secondly, we have a fee. It's only, I think it's 300 and change. They're on a scale for the actual services of the drug court. It's minimal. It clearly doesn't pay for all of their services and treatment, but it's a best practice to charge a participant for the treatment, a small amount, so they have buy-in, and they do pay that off. And we ask them to pay a little bit every time they advance in a phase. So that's been wonderful. We don't really have too many other people paying out for the drug court participants, except maybe to do some community service associated with their court costs.
Great. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Karantonis, and then Ms. Crystal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Judge.
Welcome. Thank you.
It's great to see you in 3D in life here. So, First of all, on the jail days, I was looking at the measures there. I was happy to see an annotation on the budget on page 212 that where you explicitly, or where the county manager explicitly states that the number of jail days used as sanction decreases as the county will continue utilizing these alternative sanctions. And I believe this, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is about restorative justice, right?
I wouldn't say it's specifically about that, but I would say this has been a goal to address individuals who are using substances, to not jail them or use other kinds of punishments because it's not terribly effective overall as a way to address their substance use disorder. So that's been sort of the mindset, is that we want to meet people where they are and address their behavior in a specific way that will move them forward away from drug use and away from criminal activity.
Okay, understood. So restorative justice is part of that, but not the whole. This is a vast
Okay.
array of actions. And so one thing that I don't understand very well is in the supporting measures, there is a measure that says days between arrest and or probation violation and admission. And the 2022 calendar year, it was 34 days, and the estimate for next year is 14 days. So this is significantly faster, right? So
That's the goal.
Why?
It's best to try to get someone into the drug court program as quickly as you can from the time that they're involved with the court. The purpose of which is to get them into treatment more quickly. Unfortunately, I have less control over that than the process itself does. It relies upon the defense attorney and the Commonwealth attorney to process these requests and to move the case forward. And so we endeavor to have everyone put in as quickly as possible, but that doesn't always happen. So the goal is to move it more quickly, yes.
Yeah, by halving it. But in the previous year, we were at 21, and then we jumped to 34, and now we want to go back to 14.
Well, because we don't want it to be at 34.
I
We're trying our
understand
best,
that.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to elucidate what happened, and we
I
experienced that.
think a lot of it was outside of the court's control
Okay.
and drug court's control, because there's so many other people involved. You know, the participant, the lawyers, they do definitely have an impact.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Crystal.
Thank you. The recidivism performance measures were so impressive. And I wonder, is that for the duration of participation in the program, or is that measured for some time after graduation?
It's sometime after graduation also, but
Okay.
within the program as well, yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Because you've been at this for enough years that you probably have some longer term looks as well, right?
It's very hard for us to keep that information because if a person moves to Tennessee and recidivates there, we wouldn't know about it.
I see.
Yeah, if they leave the jurisdiction and they don't have any more involvement, it's really hard for us to tell. Now, if someone were to come back to Arlington, then yes, we would know that, but it's hard to tell otherwise.
I see. Well, thank you. I think as all my colleagues have been, we're most interested in the drug court because of the model, but it is, of course, a mere sliver of what you and your colleagues do. And so we
Yeah.
appreciate your work and the efficacy and the emphasis on moving these cases forward. And all
It's
those
my
involved.
pleasure to do it. I enjoy that very much. Thank you.
And so just budget question for me, as it relates to the 3% reduction, how is that exactly going to play out within the operations of the court?
I don't think we had a lot of room to address it, but what I do think we have done is, number one, I have underfilled a coordinator position for drug court. So we had I might have mentioned this at the work session with the department, and with the manager, but one of the coordinator for the behavioral health docket, Kelly Neiman, agreed to help us with drug court. And then she agreed to be the coordinator for drug court. But it's a lot of work, and so for one person to do it, it wasn't going to function. So instead of having two different coordinators, I ended up hiring someone who's sort of the deputy for Kelly. And she's paid less than the coordinator position, so we've underfilled it. But what that's served to do is the two of them are now teaming both courts, and we're gaining some efficiencies from a services point of view in the Department of Human Services, as well as coordinating and getting a lot of bang for our buck between the courts. So that's a little bit of savings there. I was trying to think if we had another small change that we made that might have accommodated some I guess, lower spending rather than a cut, if you will. We didn't have too much. I think the only question was how much travel and training we were going to be able to do this year. I know that some has been scheduled because we've had to put it off for several years. I know that I'm not going to be going to a training out of state for drug court because I did go last year in Maryland and it was close enough, and I figured I would just pass on it for this coming year. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of room in our budget, unfortunately. So that's been tricky for us.
Yeah.
So that's the best answer I can give you is we've done what we can to, change some things about how we're functioning, but I don't know if that fully comes up to the 3% you were looking for, but I know that it's a little less than what we could have spent if we hadn't considered that.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems like salary savings that
Yeah,
have been.
salary savings is what it is.
But have
yeah.
produced the same number of FTEs, and you've figured
Yes.
out a way to efficiently deliver work. So let me
Glad
just say.
you could say it
to
instead
that,
of me.
No problem. That's very creative and appreciative.
Okay.
In a tough budget time, it's really great when you can, come up with ways of not actually diminishing the output or the work product, and also, in this case, have salary savings without losing personnel. So
That
let
was
me
the goal.
just thank you for that, and I know it's not hard, and here's hoping that at some point we make it a little easier on you.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate your understanding.
Proving how you're working. That's
That ended up being a really huge plus. It did. It really did.
what we love to hear.
Yeah, I know, it did.
I think
Anything
final
else?
question, get you out on this. I realize that we're still in this bridge period to what our new normal is, whatever that is. But how is the return to normal docketing? How is it feeling? Is it feeling like the before times? Better?
Probably closer to the before times.
Okay.
We've been talking about bringing a lot more cases in for status. That's been our biggest problem of late, is a lot of cases went sort of by the boards when we weren't having cases heard regularly just to keep up with what's been filed. So we're bringing in a lot of cases to see where cases are still open and they shouldn't be open, if you know what I mean. It's a bunch of civil cases, really.
Got it.
So we're cleaning, there's a little bit of cleanup going on.
I don't know if this works, but just to add to that, one of the things that we learned in COVID is that there were actually some things that we did that were not normal that work. So while some of the remote hearings don't work in cases, we did find that particularly in a lot of civil cases, when you're dealing with motions, that remote hearings actually are more efficient. And so places where we found efficiencies from what we learned through COVID, we're trying to implement in terms of how we practice to make it easier for people to be able to access the courts, and particularly for people on status hearings, on case settings and those types of things in civil cases who are not in the area, for them to be able to appear remotely makes it much more economical for them to be able to manage their affairs in circuit court. And so those are some of the things we're trying to maintain, having learned and gotten that technology and all the support from the county during COVID to be able to do that.
Good. Thank you. I think that's it.
Thanks so much.
All right, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We know that you balance coming over here with your regular hearing and work schedule, so we do appreciate the time. Thank you. Oh, in other words, you don't want to? Oh, it's okay. Yeah. You know what? When I get bored, I'll turn it over to you. How about that? All right. So next, we're going to be joined by our Commissioner of Revenue, who will be joining us virtually to provide us with insights into that office. So hopefully we have Commissioner Maroy on Teams to present her office.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Good afternoon, County Board Chair Dorsey, board members, and County Manager Mark Schwartz. This will be my last budget work session before I retire at the end of the year. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank the board, the county manager, department directors, specifically the HR director, DTS directors, DMF directors, AED, and their staffs for their continued support and for working with my office throughout these 20 years. I have two deputies in the audience in the county boardroom, Otilio Sabijon from the BT the Business Tax Division, and Sequita Smith from VPP, Vehicle Personal Property Tax Compliance, while my Chief Deputy and Beachside is remote, along with Deputies Bill Burgess, Jessica Silva, and Jackie Johnson. DMF staff will help us to drive the presentation. So if we can start, I would appreciate it. And a special thanks to Sasha and Emily and Richard in DMF who have helped us throughout the years and also with budget matters. I want to start with the Business Tax Division, the next slide, and tell you some of the key achievements. We implemented a new paperless initiative for annual mailings to customers who have active business tax accounts. We installed counter kiosks for customers convenient enough because they're outside on the counters to be able to register new businesses and to file online if they don't have online systems at home. And we have live staff members, of course, to help customers. We have effectively used the online appointment scheduling, and that started during COVID. As far as I'm concerned, we're still in COVID because we do have a couple of cases, positive cases, maybe 2 or so per year among staff. So it's a good thing that we're still taking care of our customers and our employees not to infect each other. We enhanced cap options to allow customers to fully manage their business tax accounts online. That way they don't have to come to the office. If they don't have a cap account, staff will help them to set some set up cap accounts by phone or by email, whichever way the customer wants to communicate with us. In the Vehicle Personal Property Tax Division, the next slide, we improved customer response time when it comes to CAP because we cross-trained the staff, so every employee can help customers answer CAP questions and helping to set up their accounts. We updated the vehicle assessment process. Of course, that was a big process to reflect the use of that one-time 88% assessment ratio. We also modified fleet customer correspondence, and we do everything electronically now instead of by paper reports. So this way we can easily adjust accounts. Established a new process with JD Power, formerly NADA, National Automobile Dealers Association, to increase efficiencies. And we added appointment opportunities for DMV Select. We are still using that, and that helps with the longer transactions. But this does not mean that we don't help walk-in customers. Walk-in customers are still getting service, but for those transactions that take a longer time, we have an appointment system that is working out pretty well. In the Compliance Division, we increased the number of field visits, and we began surveying neighboring streets along apartment parking lots and garages. We also started working with civic associations, so residential streets within civic associations are also included with the help of citizens. And we resumed issuance of administrative summonses. Budget highlights for FY24, a paperless initiative is reducing postage, mailing, and associated costs for customer correspondence. So that is the big cut that we are able to make because of our paperless initiative. The next slide is a summary of our proposed changes. As you can see, reduced spending for postage and printing, again, from newly implemented initiatives. And then the details of the proposed reductions you will see on the next slide. It will have a minimal impact because some process efficiencies have already reduced costs for the use of supplier services such as Federal Express, LexisNexis, etc. And that change, we will be able to reduce expenses by $14,300. On the next slide are some more reductions in expenses. Although customers will no longer receive assessment notifications, including tax returns, of course, we will help any customer who needs our help, who is not on cap and who needs help accessing their account online. So they get help from us by phone, by email, or we visit them, or they can come to the office and we can help them there. Key budget considerations, training and travel budget, the cost of continued employee training, and the cost of travel for a new commissioner. For the past couple of years, especially during COVID, we had virtual annual meetings. That is no longer the case, and a training will not always be virtual either. So I foresee that there will be a little bit of travel costs related to the new commissioner, and which is not in the budget. We have some travel and training budget, so that will hopefully be enough. But if not, then there might be a little bit of an increase, but hopefully not by much. And that concludes my presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner, and thank you for successfully getting through, I guess, your last budget presentation. We certainly are looking with regret to your concluding your 5th term. Thank you very much for your service, but there will be plenty of time for valedictory remarks as we continue throughout the course of the year. Today is all about budget business, so why don't you start us off, Ms. Crystal?
Sure. So was pleased to see the paperless initiative, particularly for mailing the personal property payers who have CAP accounts to minimize the duplication of notification. Can you talk a little more about the mechanics of what happens who folks may not have an updated email account, for example, or may not receive those? Are there multiple warnings? Does the mail go out if the date for deadline approaches and they haven't been paid? I imagine we're not just going to cut everyone off from contact, of course, as we make that transition. But what will that look like? What will the different notices look like as we reach out to those customers?
Correct. We will send out postcards to let folks know that they can go online, and that will happen this year. It happened last year also. They should go online to create a CAP account, and if they need assistance from us, to call us or to email us, and we will help them to set up that CAP account. But we will communicate with customers with postcards.
And that's true but those who already have a CAP account will not receive such a postcard, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And so, what happens if someone's account is, linked to an emailing address that's incorrect? Right? Knowing we experience this all the time in our public communications, that email can sometimes just be less reliable than mail. So, is there a sort of a follow-up notification that goes out by mail if the deadline's approaching and we haven't heard from those CAP payers?
Yeah. Hopefully they will know that their taxes are going to be due, and that they will receive a bill in the mail. They will receive a bill in the mail. So even if they have not received a notification from us that they should go online to check out their assessment for a vehicle, or for with the business community, it's a little bit different because there's always some contact information. But you're right, because email addresses can change. So if they receive a bill and the bill is not correct, of course, we will be flexible with customers who didn't know. Okay. If their car is picked up by us, even if they didn't register it with us, if it's picked up by us through the DMV or through our enforcement program, they will receive a bill. And if it's not correct, of course, they will call us, because the bills are still going to be mailed out by the treasurer. So some customers may be surprised to get a bill. They didn't know that they had to register their car, but we picked them up through the DMV and other avenues. And then we will, of course, work with them and adjust their accounts if the information is incorrect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you. Ms. Morroy, thank you so much for your service. It's kind of a a significant moment today to deliver your last report to the budget. I have two questions. One is the under permanent FTEs, there is one frozen and unfunded position.
Right.
I understand that the funded ones are 52, yet the count is at 53. So can you just elaborate what this position is?
That position was the customer advocate position, and we were able to because of the outreach that we're doing in each division, we were able to share the responsibility of that position. The position was held by an employee who retired, and the county decided to freeze it. So hopefully I'll get it back eventually. But if we don't get it back, the assignments of the customer advocate is shared by other staff. So each division, every employee in my office has become a customer advocate, so to say. But it was good to have the function centralized in admin, because that person would then look at the complaints that came in, if any suggestions were made by the customer about the processes in our office. Now it's shared by the different divisions. So, of course, I would love to have that position back, but functionality of the office, the operations of the office has changed over the past 20 years. So, so that's why we can, for now, live without that position.
Yes.
Thank you.
I see that. Thank you for that. I see that in fiscal year 2019, these were 1,500 customers served by the advocate, and now you project roughly a third of that. So for the next year, it's 500, 500 customers.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree.
Of course. Ms. Garvey.
Yeah, no question. Just saying it's nice to see you, Ms. Maroy, and I look forward to seeing you in person at some point before you leave.
Yes, you will.
Yeah.
Yes, oh, definitely, you will.
And question for me, Commissioner. So we been able to fund some of your desired investments in the compliance division over the last couple of years under the rationale that this would help better enable you to identify leakages and potential revenue for the general fund. Can you just give us not a numbers, but a narrative of how those investments are succeeding?
Yes, actually, because we installed the camera system, and that has greatly made us more effective and efficient in discovering vehicles that are unregistered, that were unregistered. We have 6 folks in the compliance division who do this work, and they all go out with the car with the camera system, and we've been able to increase the number of enforcement trips and be able to increase the number of vehicles discovered through this program. So this was definitely one of the big successes of the office, because there was no enforcement program when I first started in 2004. And now it's a program that's being copied by other jurisdictions. And if they haven't copied it yet, they visited us and wanted to go on a ride along with us to see how it all worked, how the technology has improved, and how the communication between systems has improved, the security of the data has improved. So yeah, it's a pride of our office.
Thank you. And similarly, we've learned about some of the very innovative but quite manual ways in which you go about trying to figure out who's complying with the requirements under our accessory homestays permitting process. Can you update us on how that stands as well?
Yeah, that's a little bit better, and staff is working on making the communication between our office and CPHD a little bit better. And there is a good communication, but there's a lot of paper and reports going back and forth. So we're working on making that a better process.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And I see no other. Oh, sorry, Mr. DeFerranti. Don't want to forget you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Maroy, for your work and your service over 5 terms. Very much appreciated. We have 9 or 8 more. I'm actually going to try and follow up with you on the challenges in the vehicles with respect to, we do get some communication from low-income individuals, and I will follow up separately offline if that is okay with you. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner, we appreciate the time and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. We'll now do a shift in presentation change and invite our treasurer, Carla De La Pava, to join us.
Here we all are in person.
We need your microphone.
You got it. It's on.
Okay. Members of the board, it has been quite a long time since we've sat at this table. Was it 3-4 years? Last year, no, we weren't at this table, though.
We weren't?
We were all spread out.
Oh, distancing. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
So this feels a little bit like back to the future, I guess.
Lost a few times in that picture. I remember that.
Mr. Schwartz, nice to see you. As mandated by the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Treasurer's mission is to receive, collect, safeguard, and disperse county funds. This next slide is a visual representation of that mission. As you know, oops, I think that's you. You have to turn off all your devices. Okay. As you know, my staff is oftentimes the face of the county. It's who the average everyday person can get in touch with, and they work very hard to provide stellar customer service. In 2022, we mailed over 427,000 bills and notices. We processed 27,000 payments at our registers alone, and 600,000 payments over all of our payment channels. We responded to 12,000 emails, answered more than 54,000 phone calls, and collected more than $40 million in delinquencies. For Crunch this year, we were able to open 2 satellite locations. We were open in Lubber Run, of course, and we were able to open in Arlington Mill. The primary benefit of a satellite office is to allow residents to pay closer to their home. But it also means fewer crowds in any one location. And I think the last 3 years has informed us of how important that actually is. It does, however, take a village to open these satellite offices, and I want to mention my appreciation for the support we received from the county, DTS, DES, DPR, all those Ds, and last but not least, the sheriff's office. We really could not do this alone. This year, we also introduced a consolidated bill for vehicle taxes. For the first time last August, we billed customers for multiple vehicles on a single invoice, which saved paper, printing, and postage. And this savings leaves us in a strong position to offset what seems to be the continual increases in paper, printing, and postage that we've seen over the years. We had lots of fantastic customer feedback, many compliments, and actually a few great suggestions as well. So our consolidated bill is still a work in process. The budget you passed last year required a number of changes to our tax bill. We had, for the first time in history, two values for each vehicle. We, of course, had the value assigned by the Commissioner of Revenue, but we also had the taxable value that was assigned by the county. We also had the elimination of the motor vehicle license fee. And as I know you are aware, our customers were very surprised and unprepared for the increased financial burden caused by the skyrocketing car values. But your decisive action to remove or eliminate the motor vehicle license fee and to tax just 88% of the vehicle value lessened the financial burden on Arlingtonians and was enormously helpful to so many that we spoke to in the last tax season. So thank you. Thank you for their efforts. At this time, Kim Rucker, Chief Deputy Treasurer, is going to share a few highlights of the enterprise payment solution.
Yes, so am I on here? Am I? Thank you. When we spoke with you last year's work session about this initiative, we were just starting the procurement process. So we've done a lot of work over the last year, and we're really excited to let you know that we'll be going live next week with our first payment types. As you know, this is a portal or payment solution that will roll out across the county to any and all departments that would like to take payments through this system. It will accept payment by e-check, credit and debit cards, but it will also allow our customers to pay using digital wallets like Venmo, PayPal, and Google Pay. So it'll be a multi-phase rollout. It will take us a while to get everybody on board. But our goal for phase one was to focus on the departments and the programs that had no online payment capability. And you can see on the schedule on the slide that we're going live first with FOIA. And you might be aware that there's new legislation this year that will require localities to accept payments online for FOIA requests. So we should be up and running in time for that to go into effect July 1. And then we'll be rolling out payments for HR, including retiree and COBRA healthcare premiums and some Health Smart program fees. And then we'll roll into taking payments for police false alarm fines. And we will also implement an IVR or phone payment system for taxes, utilities, and parking tickets. And work is well underway for phase two, which will include several DES programs, including residential permit parking, commercial and multifamily recycling fees, and other fees accepted by the Solid Waste Division. And we will roll out partial integration with CAP. And it's important to understand that this will not replace CAP. As you know, CAP is used for many other things like filing business taxes, registering cars. So our customers will continue to use CAP for those purposes, but we will be transitioning payments over to this online payment solution that we think will bring some enhanced payment capabilities for our customers.
Thank you, Kim. Management and staff resources in my department are stretched very thin by the size and scope of our current projects. We have two outstanding RFPs, one for banking services and one for printing services. As Kim explained, we have the enterprise payment solution, which is requiring a lot of time, a lot of effort. Stormwater utility billing will be a big one. And we also need to get to paperless billing. That's been on my list of things to do for quite some time now. But these projects all rely on experienced staff. And the turnover we have experienced in the last 3 years will exacerbate the difficulty of each one of these projects. If we move to our budget summary, our budget reflects a modest increase in personnel expenditures for FY24 due to employee salary and benefit adjustments. We will continue to seek process improvements and increased efficiencies. It's very important to us to be good fiscal stewards of county resources. although it's not listed here, when the manager asked us for budget cuts, we did offer to downgrade a vacant position, and it's not highlighted, but it is reflected in our total budget. The challenges we face this year include turnover and recruiting issues. I don't think we've ever really fully recovered from the hiring freeze that we had during the pandemic. And then I have to bring this up, even though I really don't want to. Tax delinquencies are 30% higher than they were a year ago at this time. And in fact, they have never been higher in my tenure. The largest increases are, of course, in vehicle taxes, and they reflect the higher values of vehicles last year. But the economy is also starting to take a toll on development and real estate taxes. So it is going to take a Herculean effort to even get in the same range of delinquencies that we had last August. I also wanted to talk to you about, and I know this isn't the time for CIP talk, but I've been told by DTS that funding for our tax system upgrade has been taken out of the CIP for FY24. I just wanted to remind you that all of the recent and upcoming county initiatives that impact the tax bill, vehicle value changes, motor vehicle license fee, stormwater utility, enterprise payment solutions, consolidated billing, paperless billing, would not have been possible without the system upgrade that we completed in 2020. At that point in time, we were 4 versions behind, and the only client still left on that antiquated version. And we vowed that we would never get that far behind again because it impeded so many initiatives that we had. There is no way we could be taking on any of this right now if we hadn't had that upgrade. So when the CIP comes in front of you, I would really appreciate it if you would keep this in mind. We cannot delay a tax upgrade by, for example, 4 months. We have to do it at a certain time of year because all of these processes happen at different times, and there's small windows of opportunity when we can start this. So, for example, our last upgrade started in March. We couldn't have waited until July or August to start that upgrade because that would have gotten us right into crunch and right into, collections, and then we get into business license, and then, it all flows in the calendar. And so when you delay it a year or delay it out of 1 year, you delay it for an entire year. But on a positive note, I appreciate the support that you all give me and our esteemed county manager, who has always been very supportive of my office. I would like to take a minute to thank each and every member of my staff for their tireless efforts. And also, in closing, I want to kind of go a little bit off script here. I would like Carolyn Meadows to come up. Carolyn, yes, we're going to embarrass her. Carolyn Meadows is my deputy for compliance. And Carolyn will be retiring next week after 35 years of dedicated and invaluable service. As you can imagine, this is an enormous loss for my office and for the county, and an enormous embarrassment to Carolyn. So please join me in wishing her the best of luck in her new adventures.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's a great way to end your presentation, and we appreciate it. And congratulations, Carolyn. You must have started when you were 15.
I was going to say, I think we violated some child labor laws when you hired her, I think.
I know, I didn't hire her.
So, Vice Chair Garvey, would you like to start us off with
Actually, right
questions?
kind of where we left a little bit with personnel. So I'm aware of hiring issues, kind of across the board, particularly in certain very stressful fields like our mental health field. What are the reasons that you're having trouble? I mean, is it the work hours? Is it just the general situation?
I would say
Is
if
it
I had
people
to-
are leaving, moving away?
Well, we had a lot of retirements, which I think happened in droves during the pandemic. We also have the greener pastures issue. We have, can you think of anything else off the top of your head?
Greener pastures that really are green. I mean, I'm trying to figure out, we need to be attracting and retaining people here in Arlington. And sometimes people talk about childcare, some people talk about housing, I'm just trying to figure out if there's a pattern or a theme that this fits into, but perhaps not. It may just be individuals, lots of individual decisions.
I think there have been a lot of, we do a lot of trading of employees within different divisions. So I mean, you can't stop that, and nor would you want to. People need to be challenged and have new things. But I think a lot of it has been, and during the pandemic, a lot of it was I think working from home is actually can be hard. And we've had people apply to our office specifically because we are in the office. So
Interesting. All right, thank you. I look forward to CIP discussions when we get there. Obviously, we will have them. And also, following, because I know the delinquency rate has been such a point of pride with you, and 30% in 1 year, that's pretty amazing. So I'm sure we'll be talking, maybe offline at some point, again, looking for sort of patterns with that and what all is going on.
we have one real estate tax delinquency that is about $500,000 for every installment, and they're delinquent. And so there'll be more of that to come, possibly.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Crystal.
Thank you. So I just wanted to thank you for your partnership last year in communicating the personal property tax changes. It was obviously a really tumultuous time. One of the things we heard from folks quite often was this sense that the board had made the decision to gouge them or take advantage of the wild fluctuations and increases in personal property, which is to say car resale values. And we sought, when I was chair last year, to explain that we had not treated that as a windfall, but rather all of that had been, so to speak, spent in the form of personal property tax relief. It's just that we had done it in a progressive way by eliminating the decal fee. That was a little bit of an exercise in communications, figuring out how to do that. And your team's thoughtfulness and empathy as the front line of receiving many of those complaints, working directly with county communication or county board communication staff, was really exemplary, and we appreciate it. So thank you. I also wanted to ask, this is probably a question for our manager and DMF as much as it is for you, but since again we work hand in glove on the administration of the personal property tax, the manager's recommendation is to return to a 100% assessment. So if there are any insights that you all can shed as we do that, it sounds like that market has dramatically stabilized, but what we are seeing in the market, if we anticipate there'll be some types of vehicles that will be hit harder than others, will people be generally seeing their assessments go back to, pre-2022 valuations, or is it more we've sort of stabilized from 2022 valuations? Any insights you can tell us about kind of where that's been headed?
Kim Rucker has worked really closely with the budget office and with the commissioner staff. And I think you might be able to answer that.
Yeah, so
Directly.
I think, and Richard, jump in.
He's on standby.
Jump in to correct me. But I think what we've seen in looking at the car values that the commissioner has received, that most vehicles are returning to lower than 2021. So
Great.
back to a little bit of depreciation.
Okay.
Probably not as much as would have happened if we didn't experience last year, but most of them, by and large, are going back to below their 2021 value.
Great, okay. Well, it is my most fervent wish that the partnership between this year's chair and the treasurer will be on matters more constructive and less
Oh, we've already got a
less
project that we've been
difficult.
working on, so
than communicating about.
wish fulfilled.
Yeah, there we go. All right, thank you.
All right, Mr. DeFerranti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for, I'm gathering that Arlington Mill will continue, and that's just really appreciate that, I hope. A big thank you for your work on the enterprise system. I don't envy you, but I admire the work, and I'm grateful for it. Thanks. On the other two, in the interest of time, I'll be curious about staff turnover as far as sort of the percentages, just because I'm trying to continue to learn. And then on the CIP cost, I will also follow up offline. I'm just mindful we have 7 more presentations. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also very briefly, indeed, thank you so much for the effort last year. I mean, we all learned something about how to monitor this asset and how to assess that. I'm very curious to see how the market has recovered and what's the vector there. I have a question on the investment interest income. So there is one part that, I mean, you know, higher interest rates mean that the money that we have in the bank renders more, yields more. So, and I've seen here that, you know, it's not enormously more, like 400,000 more. But what's the outlook for that, and how do you manage to get the most out of that?
I think the outlook for interest income is really quite strong. Part of why it's a slower rollout is that we've had things invested in longer term assets, so those have to roll off before they can get reinvested in higher returned investments. And so that part will take a little time. We have been, in the last couple of years before the pandemic, we had been trying to shorten up our portfolio exactly for this moment, so that we would have available cash to invest. And I will tell you, the pandemic year, making sure that, you know, doing the analysis on what kind of cash flows that the county would need. I mean, if I bring you back 3 years, we were all very uncertain. And so we had a lot of, we luckily had been very short on a lot of our investments. And it turned out that you know, there was a lot of federal help that it wasn't the worst we had imagined, but. Yeah.
Right. This was, I mean, I thought that because we opted to be more liquid, you know, more short term, that we would benefit from an increase of interest rates right now.
Oh, yes, we will. And I assume that you're looking at last year's interest income, right? Rates didn't, I don't think they really started to go up until July. You'll see a lot more interest income this year, I'm sure.
Right. Thank you again for everything. I take your, I cannot overstate how excited I am about the enterprise portal. Finally, we get somewhere that looks like e-governance, and that's right. I hear you on the tax, the update of the tax management system, but mind you that CIP round is next year, so we want to really be ready. If there is a timing problem, we need to know that. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right. So one quick question for me: Will the enterprise solution replicate the cap structure of, what is it, 2.5% for credit cards, no charge for e-checks?
It is actually going to be 2.35%
Hey.
for card payments and digital wallets, and no charge to the customer for e-checks.
All right. Thank you. All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you all very much. We appreciate your time this afternoon. And we'll tee up next our registrar, Gretchen Reinemeyer, who will be joining us virtually. She'll also be joined by Scott McGeary, who is here in person to do the presentation on the electoral board.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm So we can go to the next slide, please, Joe. So I am here today to represent the Office of the Electoral Board and Voter Registration. I apologize for not being able to be there in person, and I want to thank Joe, Emily, and David for making the last-minute arrangements for me to appear virtually. Today we do have our Secretary of the Electoral Board there. Scott, I don't know if you want to say a few words at the beginning or end, but just let me know. So our directive as the Office of the Electoral Board and Voter Registration is to maintain an accurate list of registered voters and administer safe, secure, and transparent elections in an equitable manner. Next slide, please. The 2023 fiscal year has brought some new challenges. Last fall, we implemented same-day registration for the first time, and more than 2,000 voters were able to both register and cast their ballots on the same day. We also began reporting results by precinct for both mail and early votes. This did require the purchase of a ballot-on-demand system in early voting, meaning that ballots are printed when a voter checks in during early voting. We also contracted with the vendor to print and mail ballots for us, and we believe that both of these programs will see a greater efficiencies and cost reductions moving forward. We also moved into an expanded suite as a part of the renovation here at Bosman Government Center. I also wanted to thank County Manager Schwartz for recognizing a structural change for how poll workers are paid with his Excellence Awards this year. This change will allow us to pay election officers on a more efficient and predictable schedule. As I'm sure Mr. Dorsey might remember, we've been working on this project for the better part of 10 years, and I wanted to recognize both the HR department and my team, Tate, Camera, and Sonia, for their work on this important project. Next slide, please. I've spoken for several years about changes in voting trends in response to expanding voting options beyond Election Day. Over the past several years, early voting has increased at a rate of more than 1,000% and vote by mail at a rate of more than 3,000%. We are starting to see signs that rates are leveling off. When I say leveling off, this year we noticed around a 50% increase in the request or voters choosing to cast votes before Election Day, either early or by mail. Another trend that we're starting to monitor is we're starting to see an increase in ballots that are tabulated after Election Day. In 2000, only a handful of ballots were tabulated after the election. In 2022, 4% of the ballots were tabulated after the election as a result of same-day registration and a shift in due dates for mail ballots and the availability of drop boxes on Election Day. While this might seem insignificant, it does delay certification of the election by a couple of days. Next slide, please. We are preparing to be the first office in the Commonwealth to run an election using ranked choice voting this year. The Department of Elections is proving to be a great partner in developing a suite of voter education and training materials for us. This will allow us to focus on local programs to get these materials in front of our voters. Also, next fiscal year, we will have an extra election in there. There is a tentative date of a presidential primary in March of 2024. Next slide, please. We do have a 7% increase in expenses this year as a result of personnel increases, implementation of ranked choice voting, and the presidential primary. These costs are partially offset by the anticipated reimbursement for costs associated with that presidential primary and the implementation of parts of ranked choice voting. Next slide, please. Looking forward, we are squarely focused on one date, November 5th, 2024. Today, we are 616 days away from the presidential election. That's just over 20 months away, during which we must conduct 4 elections. With our modest staff of 9.8 FTEs, our 8 permanent employees. The months highlighted in blue on this calendar represent months when we will be running an active election. Once May hits, we will pretty much be in constant election mode, and years like this take an enormous toll on staff in my office. We look forward, as ever, to partnering with our supportive county manager and other departments to make sure we can continue to deliver safe, secure, and accessible elections as efficiently as possible here in Arlington. That is all I have today. Scott, did you want to say a few words?
Yes, thanks. Thank you very much. Appreciate your excellent presentation. Just a couple of thoughts. from this past year and looking forward. And I would add to my appreciation, Mr. Manager, to your support, both for the staff and also for your brand new conference room, which we enjoyed meeting in several times for our sessions before the much anticipated renovated space for our office was completed. So we appreciate that. And also with respect to the number of same-day voter registrations, as I recall, we had twice as many as did Loudoun County, which has twice, I believe twice both the population and the number of voters. And we had the pleasure of keeping each other company to make certain we could complete the vote counting. We're used to in recent years having to come back and finish our canvass usually on Friday or Saturday. This year, because of the additional, again, glad to see many new people registering to vote indeed, we also were here down the hall on Sunday. This year brings us a record number of primary contests for the as we call it, the constitutional county board year. And we have the greatest number of candidates in the general election on the ballot. And next year we have the greatest number of voters, as certainly very important, each year being important with at least one of you on the ballot. And as Mr. Dorsey recalls, as the only member of the county board who's ever been an election official. And I recall visiting you at Arlington School, making things work. So we appreciate your great support from the past, at the present, looking towards the future. And last but not least, when I was in Richmond, as usual, for the General Assembly session, I was in the House Privileges and Elections Committee, where legislation to add ranked choice voting as a method for federal elections and constitutional offices was defeated. Delegate Bloxham of the Eastern Shore mentioned that he thought it was prudent for the General Assembly to wait until they could see how we did here in Arlington. So the eyes of the Commonwealth will be upon us. We've appointed outstanding qualified election officials, and I'm privileged to continue working with Gretchen and our 2 members of the board and our great staff, looking forward to bringing you the type of primary, special, and general elections as you would expect us to do and the citizens and voters of this community deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McGarry. Thank you, Ms. Reinemeyer. I'll say, first of all, thank you for the shout out. I'm very nostalgic for those days as an election official and can just say firsthand that I continue to be amazed at Arlington's ability to not only handle the volume and complexity of our annual election cycle, but the incredible interest in participation among our constituency and to bring with them the initiatives to make it both easy and efficient and to do so with remarkably little error, all with a staff that seems way too small for all that you accomplish. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Ms. Garvey.
Yeah, thank you. I might throw a few more bouquets. I mean, really, when you look at how it's complex, and we always have an election going on, you know, from our standpoint, it seems kind of crazy, but from your standpoint, it's even more so. And I found myself, when the first slide came up, you know, maintain an accurate list of registered voters, administer elections fairly and efficiently, open, transparent, equitable manner. I mean, when I first got on this board, you know, there's the same thing. It was kind of, yeah, well, you know, it's a kind of yawn, right? I mean, this is what we do all the time in Arlington, not a big deal. And I know we've been affected by all the things going on nationally, and I just want to thank again our registrar and everyone working in elections, because I know that behind the scenes, there's been some real tough stuff going on, and you're handling it with grace and not letting it interfere with the work at all. So thank you so very much. And I don't know if there's anything more, Ms. Reinemeyer, you want to say, or Mr. McGarry, about ranked choice voting. That is kind of a big thing we're doing. What, if you would like to, if you don't decline to answer the question, that's fine. What worries you the most? What's kind of the toughest thing about taking on this ranked choice voting as for the first time?
So that's a really good question. I think where we are right now, it's all of the unknown. So we can plan for the things we know, but we can't plan for the things that we don't know. And while ranked choice voting has been implemented across the country, because every state's election laws do differ slightly, it really is kind of launching this program within the context of Virginia's election laws. And there are a lot of things that we want to make sure that we're doing with fine-tooth comb to make sure that we are in full compliance with Virginia's election laws. So I don't know. I would say we're ready, but there's a lot of work ahead for us in the next 3 months. So
You're as ready as you can be. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
If I can add one thought, I think I agree with Ms. Renmeyer, and also I'm pleased to see that there are as many county board candidates as there are. There are two I wish were still going to be on the ballot, but thank you for your great service. So I'm delighted that we have more than 3. And so last count I had was 5, maybe 6 will come about. So we know that we can indeed implement it. Mm-hmm. And with the support that we're asking from you today, we'll be able to promote it. There are a number of organizations in the community that are willing to partner with us so we can give the greatest promotion of it. It certainly would also be helpful for the political party having that primary and the candidates to do what they can, and we can work together to make sure good things happen. And one more thing, if I may thank Mr. Kirantonis for taking time to come down the hall to our meeting. It's the first time we've had, in my memory, a member of the board having occasion to be with us. We always enjoy visiting with you here and appreciated your taking time out of your schedule to be with us. And thank you for your additional interest shown that day on the matters being discussed.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Crystal, and then Mr. DeFerranti.
So on that same line of discussion, with ranked choice voting, a resource question, since we are talking about the budget, when we passed the resolution, we talked about the $75,000 in additional resources required to do that outreach. I think that's being spent. You were talking about the contract for outreach materials, but I am so put in mind when I see how few staff you all are working with. I know there were plans to do, train the trainer model, a fair amount of additional outreach to the community, but recognizing that's a small staff, do you foresee, a need for, I suppose this would be in fiscal 23, but I happen to know a manager who has a contingent. Are there, additional resources for needed for that community education and outreach to make sure our voters are all prepared to, really take advantage of this opportunity by having this opportunity to rank their candidates, preferred candidates?
Thank you, Ms. Crystal. Yes, the asks are certainly on their way to county manager, staff, and other departments to help in these efforts. We are very fortunate in Arlington County to be able to leverage some of those community partners that you spoke about to kind of carry the torch into their communities for us so that we don't have to go to every civic association meeting. We have people that are willing to do that. We just want to prepare them with the resources they need to accurately describe our voting method here in Arlington.
So those materials are really about preparing them to do trainings rather than just flyers explaining what this is.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. I think that's really helpful. And I know that that will be welcome. And we have not only local partners, but in fact, state partners. I just heard from one of the advocates of ranked choice voting that they're hoping to do a training themselves in Arlington. And so I think there'll be a lot of folks leveraging those materials in which we are investing. And as you both noted, hopefully other communities around the Commonwealth who will seek to learn from our experience too. I'll note finally, we'd had some discussion back in November about the acquisition of voting machines that would allow ranking of more than 3 choices. And I know there's been some discussion in the community, especially given how many candidates have emerged from the county board, that we all rue that we're unable to have that. I would argue in any event, being able to rank 3 is being much better than being able to rank none. So it's certainly still worth doing. But I know, it's sort of an opportunity to surface between supply chain issues and, general challenges of procurement. That was not feasible for this election, but I look forward to a very successful implementation of this, from which I think we can learn, and hopefully others in the Commonwealth will as well. So thank you for your leadership on it, Ms. Randemeyer, and this support of the Electoral Board as well.
Thank you, Mr. DeFerranti. Mr. DeFerranti, followed by Mr. Kirantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is, perhaps I could use a refresher, perhaps it's not quite set. Is there a first have we set the time for the beginning of that education campaign just yet?
Yeah, we are anticipating getting materials from the Department of Elections on April 1st. So April really will be our launch. And this does time with, we will have ballots at the beginning to mid part of April. So once we get our ballots in hand, then we can really go into the community and start educating our voters about what's going to be on the ballot for this upcoming primary.
Thank you, Ms. Reinmeyer, and thank you both for your leadership and work. Yes.
I might add, I think that given the 45-day early voting, that helps us in terms of being able to start the voting process, see what questions arise and what can help us as we get closer to the June 20th primary date. It'll be a trial run.
Thank you. And Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I echo all the thanks and the gratitude of this board, both to our registrar and to the Electoral Board for their work. I haven't been able to be a elections official because I usually linger in front of the election, of the location, for other reasons, for more partisan reasons, I should say. But I live with one. My wife is an election official, and I have a second-hand, but very close account of how this goes every year, and it's always an exceptional account. So thank you so much for organizing that. Coming back to the issue of the challenges of this year with a change in our voting system for one election in the primaries. So I understand that we are working all together to get as much public education out so that we can serve. Still, 2 out of 3 voters will be voting in person on election day, if I read the numbers correctly. So do we think that 400 election officers is an appropriate number for an election that has 2 challenges? First, a new system, and secondly, a different system for one office and different system for other offices. So we may want to have somebody on site to explain that to some voters. I've been explaining many things to voters when I greet them before they enter the location, so I can imagine that there will be a need for that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. That is an excellent point. I would say in a primary, our staffing is actually reduced, so we only send out around 250 election officers. So we are looking to add extra, basically a ranked choice voting officer to help with that education piece at all 54 of our polling locations. So
great, thank you. That's great information. Thank you so much.
Chairman, just mentioned that I appreciate Gretchen's answer, and also we have begun doing something that I think will additionally help us every year going forward, and that is we have by law appointed the bulk of our election officials at our most recent meeting. We are also asking the political parties to please continue sending names of persons interested in working, and it could be for this year, for next year, for future years, all the above, so that every month we have the potential, every month we have the potential of approving new people to join our ranks, and we'll closely monitor that number. Next year, again, is our largest turnout year. I expect we'll be back in the range of, as I recall, Gretchen, it was 800 workers. So we constantly monitor that, and we'll make sure that every precinct is fully staffed. And also the election chiefs, again, as Mr. Chair can remember, LFC was one, the election chiefs have the flexibility to have those who are working on election day move around and handle various responsibilities as need be. They may do the same thing throughout the day, or they may be moved around depending on where we need the greatest amount of help to make sure that we have the quickest in and out that we possibly can. And again, I think once again, having that early voting will help us be sure we're geared up for the primary day and for November. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your wife's service, and look forward to visiting her on primary day.
Thank you both. Really appreciate you. This was terrific. And You're now excused and relieved, or however you want to describe it, and we'll move next to our Commonwealth's attorney. And so I'd like to invite, always a more august title, the Commonwealth's attorney for Arlington and the City of Falls Church.
Yeah, right.
Marissa DeConti Tafty, welcome.
Thank you so much. Hello, members of the county board.
We need you to put on your microphone there. Thank you.
Hello, members of the county board. Thank you for all of your work. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Manager. And thank you, Alicia, for advancing the slides. And I lost you, but thank you. If you would, please start the slide presentation. We can go to the second slide. Well, this is our mission statement and a nice photo of some of our staff. They say hello. We can go to the next slide. Oh, and I'm sorry, I'm here with Laura Saul Edwards, our office administrator. So the guiding principles that we rely on, which are sort of our three North Stars, are to prosecute crime, work for justice, and fight for reform. And in terms of prosecuting crime, we focus on serious cases, things that jeopardize the safety, welfare. Oh, should I wait for Ms. Crystal to come back?
No, you're fine. Please continue. She can hear you even though you can't see her.
Okay, of the community. So we hold people accountable for car thefts, carjacking, serious assaults, rape, homicide. But we also divert cases to allow for rehabilitation and for substance abuse and mental health treatment. In terms of working for justice, we are very cognizant that we work both on behalf of the victim and on behalf of the accused. And we also work on behalf of the community. So we empower victims through innovative restorative justice practices and a prosecution model that focuses on victim needs. We work to defend the constitutional rights of defendants, and we work to build community trust. In terms of reform, our philosophy on that is that not every social ill needs to be criminalized, not every crime needs to end in punishment, not every punishment lead to incarceration, and not every incarceration should be so long and punitive that it leaves no room for redemption and rehabilitation. Which is, if you would advance to the next slide, please. All of this is about equity. And reform itself has equity at its core. So every day, with the culture of the office, every case, every policy, we are focused on equity. And reimagining the legal system is about doing the work in a way that doesn't repeat the mistakes of the past. We've had periods where we've gone through reforms, and we've had progressive eras. And the most significant one was the turn of the 20th century, where we really realized that socioeconomic factors were the drivers of crime. And we realized that for white European immigrants who were in terrible socioeconomic circumstances, but we didn't recognize that for Black people or people of color or people with ID and DD or mental health issues or any of that. So we're trying to operate in a way that does not repeat those mistakes. And from the beginning, we partnered with independent researchers who determined that there were in fact significant racial disparities in the way that people were charged in Arlington. And if you were Black, you were charged at a 50% higher rate of seriousness than if you were white. And that also led to disparities in conviction rates, disparities in incarceration rates, and disparities in length of probation. So we set about to start enacting policies that were evidence-based and would help to address some of those. We've had continuing partnerships with VERA, and in Motion for Justice. We have partnerships with OAR, we have partnerships with Restorative Arlington, and we are willing to partner with anybody else who is doing the same work. We've also partnered in terms of education because some of this is not just about policies. Policies are wonderful, but if you don't change culture, you're going to be repeating the same mistakes in the past. So we've partnered with experts like Professor Sherry Soanes and Professor Kristen Henning. Professor Henning has twice trained our staff on the trauma response of youth in our criminal legal system, particularly Black youth. And in all of the examples that I'm about to discuss, we are trying to address disparities and biases to create equity. So next slide, please. So one of our most exciting things that we've done is we've hired through a Bureau of Justice Assistance grant the Reverend Grace Woodward as the Director of Restorative Justice and Diversion Services. And her job, because close to 70% of our court-involved population is not from Arlington, and we can't provide Arlington services for most of those people, almost no Arlington services for those folks. She's charged with setting about identifying and developing relationships with diversion services in other communities, and finding the ones that work and allowing us to refer people to those services in other communities as well. And inside the office, she would be vetting the cases that go to diversion. Because her background is in social work, she would be vetting the cases that are most likely to have the success rates and most likely to result in rehabilitation to services, diversion services, but also to restorative justice as appropriate. So she's also working very closely with our victim witness staff for that purpose. We do have a challenging hiring environment with surrounding jurisdictions getting many new positions and a nationwide prosecutor hiring and retention crisis. I have raised the issue with the county board about a year ago when, and there have been news articles and job fairs, including a Reuters article entitled "District Attorneys Struggle to Recruit and Retain Lawyers." The National District Attorneys Association just had a job fair, its first ever in its history of over 50 years of existence, in January, and we attended the job fair, and there were more employers than there were job seekers at the job fair. We are still working with body-worn cameras, and Falls Church Police Department has brought those online. And just as a reminder, we work with, very, very closely with 5 law enforcement agencies. We think about ACPD as being, the law enforcement agency, but we actually work with a number of different agencies. Airports, the Washington, the Greater Washington, MWA is what we call it in the office, is now also getting body-worn cameras, and we anticipate that Metro Transit will as well. So almost all of our law enforcement officers are getting body-worn in the near future. Next slide, please. We have in the code, the Commonwealth's attorneys, over 250 pages of code that refer to our duties, and some would be surprised that our duties include things like code enforcement and electoral fraud, which I am always delighted to see, Gretchen, because we work very closely together. We also work on rights restoration and expungements, and I'm very pleased that in December, we, with the help of the clerk of court, and several community-based organizations, Pro Bono Defense Council, the Coalition of Black Clergy, we hosted our first ever expungement clinic that was free to people who are seeking expungements. And we hosted it it was at Arlington Presbyterian Church, and 39 people were served, 19 expungement petitions filed, and 12 have already been granted. People were so excited that they lined up several hours before the expungement first started, just to have a place in line to be the first to get in. And expungement is important because having a criminal record, even an arrest, will adversely impact employment opportunities, the ability to get loans for cars or homes, and the ability to attend some trade schools, universities. and to get some licenses. And so we hope to make this a biannual, meaning every 6 months, and I hope the clerk of court is up for that. We also have completely implemented and are being nationally recognized for a preemptory strike policy designed to address both explicit and implicit bias in the selection of jurors, so that juries can be a real cross-section of the community, so that we protect due process and so that we enable community members to discharge their civic responsibilities, which in turn creates buy-in and establishes trust between government and the community. Throughout the nation, we have seen the pandemic increase, since the pandemic, an increase in gun violence. Year after year, we are breaking records in this country of how many guns are sold in the United States. And year after year, the time frame between the purchase of a legal gun and the use of that legally purchased gun in an illegal way has been decreasing. And in other words, we are drowning in guns, and we are starving for common sense gun laws. Now, I don't make laws, and I can't change the situation of gun sales, but we have initiated working with Moms Demand Action to try to design a gun buyback program that is innovative, evidence-based, and would provide opportunities not only to track what interventions are effective to reduce gun violence, but gun buybacks programs also provide an opportunity to educate the community about safe gun storage, to provide gun locks and gun safes, and to educate the community about emergency substantial risk orders. This is also in addition to the almost full drug court that we've maintained and the full behavioral health docket that is hopefully, from what I hear from DHS, on the verge of expanding. And so we're very excited about that. Next slide, please. These are the sort of numbers based on the personnel increases. The one additional staff is Grace Woodward, as I mentioned, and that is grant funded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Next slide, please. So that slide did not include what we are asking for in our next budget cycle. And one of the things that we need to do if we want to support vulnerable communities and protect them, and that's related to some of the duties that are not typically thought of as Commonwealth attorney duties, is bring on an investigator to help investigate OSHA violations and help code enforcement investigate illegal or criminal code violations of code enforcement. And then also wage theft, which is a huge problem. And we have no means right now to investigate wage theft. So I am asking for an investigator to help us investigate these particular issues where we don't have much support in the way of other agencies that are willing to take the lead on it. So we would like to take the lead on those. We also have, because we work with so many different law enforcement agencies, there are times where we need follow-up, and we need follow-up on our timelines. And since we don't supervise the other law enforcement agencies, and some are less consistent and some are more consistent than others about following our lead on what needs to be pursued, we are asking for our independent investigator to help. And given that law enforcement agencies are seeing hiring struggles and challenges, that sort of trickles down, and it would be a help to them for us to have this as well. It's also a way of supporting victims and supporting witnesses who do not want to be served by people, law enforcement who are sort of in uniform with marked cars. And we really need to be sensitive somebody who is cooperating doesn't get served by a subpoena, or a victim who is concerned about their safety does not get served by a subpoena. And so that we can find our victims and witnesses when sometimes it becomes challenging, because of their personal situations to find them. We have had a conviction review unit. So far, we were able, with that unit, to support the reversal of one conviction that was based on improper legal advice, and we saved somebody from deportation as a result of getting that conviction overturned. We were able, with the clerk of court, again, to locate transcripts and physical evidence that were thought to be lost. And we currently have 2 DNA cases under investigation internally that we anticipate will require some litigation. We've determined, when I first came to the board with a request for the CRU, part of it was in part because we had 31 cases that were referred to us by the Department of Forensic Science because there had been an improper testimony by one of their DNA lab analysts. We have looked over those cases. We've determined to close out 18 of those cases, but we've identified 13 of those that require notice to the defendant and DNA testing and potential litigation to follow up on that. We have had 14 inmate inquiries that are pending, and we've responded to at least 4 inmate inquiries, and we've responded to several extensive requests for reviews, post-conviction reviews of cases. And because post-conviction requires so much engagement and that it's so familiar and similar to FOIA requests, this role has been this role, like the FOIA role, sort of lives with this individual. And we have received regular FOIA requests and are trying to keep up with them, and it's been challenging, given our commitment to transparency and the changes in FOIA laws. Hiring this position has been extremely challenging because while the board was generous enough to give us the position out of contingency funds, people don't want to work in this environment in a temporary job that is not guaranteed. And so we've lost very good candidates. And this is a very specialized area of law. So it's hard to find good candidates to begin with, but we've lost good candidates because of the temporary nature of this position. With our case management system, we have had the same exact system that has remained completely unchanged for 9 years. So it's behind the times. And we have had significant problems with being able to collect and analyze data. It has many, many flaws. The system, it was not designed to collect and analyze data. It was designed as a case management system to hold calendars and dates and documents. We have tried many, many ways to make it produce data and have not succeeded. We are proposing an upgrade and an interface, some interfaces with the courts. Those interfaces would enable, it would speed up PBK, but it would also, and PBK is prosecuted by Carpel, and it would enable PBK to speak directly with other databases so that we could export information with efficiency and accuracy. The estimated cost is really broad right now because they need to study the databases that we'd like to interface with still, and we don't have that information back from them yet. But it would be somewhere between a one-time $10,000 to $25,000 for the licenses and a 20% annual maintenance fee. I will try to, we've discussed targeted support. There is an appetite to come to our office because our office is very attractive around the nation, but the Virginia bar poses a significant burden and obstacle for people coming here. And so we have people who could waive in, who are experienced attorneys, but it would cost $2,500 for them to waive in. Or we have people who, have a few, less than 5 years of experience, but still close, and would have to take the bar, and it costs about $3,500 to take the bar and get admitted. I am advocating for the Virginia Bar Association to adopt the universal bar exam, but that's going to be years in the future and not now. And then finally, I want to say something about staff and the wonderful victim witness, the role that victim witness plays. They support victims on a daily basis. They are usually the first person in our office to speak to victims. And they are, throughout the pandemic, they were on the ground doing the work and the support for victims. But too many of them have to have second jobs in order to pay their expenses and can't even afford to live in Arlington. And that's not fair to them, it's not fair to the community, and it's not fair to the victims. And so I would ask that, I've asked in the past for family job studies. It's the victim witness and paralegals have been sort of, not addressed and aren't going to be addressed for at least another year. In the meantime, their pay is extremely low, and they're some of the people who've gotten experienced really the brunt of the pandemic and the brunt of other people's pain and secondary trauma. And so I would like to advocate for taking a look at their salaries and, coming up with something that allows them to live without having to have two jobs. Next slide, please. I think that what we've done in the Office of the Commonwealth's Attorney is show that we can do the work of public safety and do it with a lens, though, of transformative justice. And I hope the county will approve these requests and support our important work.
Thank you, Ms. Degani Tafti, and we'll begin with questions from the board. I know Ms. Crystal's on a bit of a schedule, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to give you the first
Thank
round.
you. Unfortunately, and this is an opportunity to share my regrets with others who are here to speak. We have a childcare issue and have to leave at 5, but I look forward to watching the recordings of the remaining sessions. Thank you very much, Ms. Degani Tafti. As you know, and I can see Mr. Dorsey has our history, budget history. There have been really significant increases in the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office over the last 4 years, and so I appreciate kind of the sense of activity, right, that's going on in the scope that has been happening. So here is a very literal question, which is that even though this is my 8th budget, I learn something new every and in this case was that we, Arlington and Falls Church, provide prosecution as well as public defense for cases originating at MWA property. Mm-hmm. So I wonder to what extent, I'm interested in getting a sense from you, how many cases of those you're seeing in a given year, and perhaps in follow-up from the manager, do we have any sort of memorandum of understanding? Is there any reimbursement for the services that we're providing, and any insight you can share with us now, and then I can talk to our team and follow up.
So I did actually ask MWA when they started hinting about getting body-worn cameras. I did figure out the number. I don't have it off the top of my head, unfortunately, but I could get it back to you. And I did tell them that I would request that they please include reimbursement. And I think that we had figured out that it would be the equivalent of just under 2 attorneys if you added up the hours, but I don't want to be quoted on that because I don't remember. But this has been something on my mind. And the increases that you've seen are really largely driven by body-worn camera because it's changed the nature. I mean, I still support it. I still think it's important. I think it's helped the police department in a great many ways. It's helped our office in a great many ways, but there's no doubt that it has changed, a review of a file that would have been 30 minutes, for a very simple misdemeanor. It has turned that into a 4 to 5 hour body-worn camera extravaganza. Yeah. And we see, very, very significant numbers if we're actually trying to watch it, and it's also produced a great deal of administrative work. And so part of what we've done, with our staffing is frozen 2 attorney positions and are, temporarily bringing in additional paralegals to try to relieve attorneys of some of that administrative responsibility that comes with the body-worn camera with changes in discovery, which again are good, changes in FOIA, and so many of the reforms that we've seen have been worthwhile, but have not come at no price.
Well, that's really helpful, and maybe this is an opportunity for us to talk in general about the services being provided. So I can follow up with our team on that. Thank you for that insight. It does sound like it's top of mind. Speaking of top of mind, just one other thing that I wanted to note. It's so interesting that you bring up the gun buyback program. Ms. Garvey and I are actually we're just meeting with the ACPD staff today. I was delighted to learn we have a gun take back program in Arlington, and so I think for my part, I'm really interested in, and we'll be exploring this with Moms Demand Action. Given that the research isn't quite there to support, right, that these gun buyback programs, it's really hard to prove that they're taking off the streets guns that, or out of homes, right, especially in domestic violence cases that otherwise would have been used for a crime. I think it could be really interesting to try to get a sense of, is it the $100 gift card that's driving the buyback, or is it the ease of taking it somewhere where it's safe, awareness that these programs exist? So I hope very much that your office can engage in those conversations with ACPD. We were talking, for example, you can imagine a whole spectrum of services, right, from being able to refer responsible gun owners to the free lockbox they can get from DHS, right, a safe place to drop off, a gun that was maybe owned by a parent that passed away, all the way to, where can you get trainings about how to safely store guns or even how to safely use guns. So I would love to have the partnership of the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office kind of in that mix too.
I would love that. And I am aware of the data. The problem that has occurred in the way that the data has been collected is that most of the gun buybacks are anonymous and no questions asked. And they're for small amounts, which is really $100 or $250. Our idea was to be more innovative and incorporate some violence intervention programming with that, and some job skills as well. And so our thought was to, give away laptops and tablets, but also have people there to, provide free tutoring for GED studies, to provide free services for resume development and interview skills, so that people are being drawn in with the promise not just of one trip to the supermarket, but like real social services supports that would help them, and that would also allow for longitudinal studies to determine whether these particular individuals are then benefiting from from the program. And we're hoping to target people who are more high risk. We're hoping to target people who are having depression and suicidal thoughts and have guns and want to make sure that they or their family members don't end up using those. And given that I think the suicide hotlines have seen an explosion of, I want to say 300% of DHS would have these numbers better than I would, but we've seen an explosion of mental health issues. We've seen an explosion of suicide attempts. Anecdotally, looking at the watch commander reports from the police department, I can see that there is just sort of an unrelenting pace of attempted suicides and successful suicides, and to be able to to attract those people to something else by providing services as well as the buyback is, I think, it's different than anyone else has done, and it would be innovative.
Well, I think that sounds great, and hopefully there's an opportunity to coordinate with DHS. I mean, I would say we're very eager to get people in those services, irrespective of whether they have a gun to sell back to the county. And I know DHS is working to step those up, or to get more people in the extensive services that are already available. And of course, too, there's a role for Project Peace, in which I know you help steer. We do know that a gun in a home increases the fatality risk of a given incident by as much as 4 times. So lots of fertile ground to sow here. So glad to have the creativity. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. We're going to start this way with Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Garantafti, thank you so much for the presentation. That's an office that has so many lines of business. I mean, we would spend the better part of the day here, Mr. Manager, to discuss all of them. I'm interested in a couple of things related to your request for an investigator position. And you mentioned something that I care, it's very close to my heart, the ability to investigate effectively wage theft.
Correct.
I have heard many times from our unions, but also from common people, that it has become increasingly difficult to investigate and to properly prosecute, effectively prosecute these crimes. So how do you envision this position work in this sense? And have we been able, and why haven't we been able to prosecute these crimes until now in an effective way?
Well, it's a combination of reasons, but I have been referred cases by unions and then in turn referred them to law enforcement, and the current penalties are mostly misdemeanors or civil fines, and there's not an appetite to spend time investigating misdemeanors.
Personnel problem.
It hasn't attracted very much interest in the past. We do have a challenging statutory scheme, but we can't fix that until we know that it's not working, until we know the ways in which it's not working. And so, I think that we could be making bringing some charges, under things like theft of services and that sort of thing. But having somebody who would work at the Commonwealth's direction would be very helpful. And they would, obviously work very closely with unions to obtain the information to begin with.
Thank you. I understand that it's difficult to prosecute that, but it affects literally thousands of people here in this county. And the damages of that are incredibly high, as far as I can tell from the experience I have with constituents. So thank you for highlighting that. I will really think very carefully about supporting this.
The damages are twofold too. They're, with the individual who is not being paid, and it's also a safety issue. There was a very large case of wage theft involving the installation of electrical wiring. And, if that sort of thing is not installed properly, if people who are installing it are, not trained and not paid properly, that poses significant risk to the community as well. And, obviously there's the economic impact, but then there's a safety impact as well.
Well, of course, somebody who defrauds their workers for their salaries, we won't expect them to be compliant with everybody, for everything else. Thank you so much.
Vice Chair Garvey.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vagani-Tofty. I was looking at the performance measures, and there are a number that are pretty striking with the great diminution in cases. And it says in the notes that the criminal and traffic case count has been restructured for FY23. So I assume that's a lot of the reason that there have been, for example, the Juvenile Domestic Relations District Court misdemeanor cases from 446 in 2019 to 169. And there are just some large drops, and I assume they all have to do with what the restructuring was. Can you explain to me what that is, the restructuring?
We are not doing non-jailable traffic cases unless there's an outstanding reason to do it. So I would have to come back to you to explain what exactly those numbers, what is the difference between those numbers.
Okay, that would be helpful. And if you look over on that, and it's on pages 262 and 263 of the printed budget, and I would be interested in the future. For example, the misdemeanor cases, criminal misdemeanor cases went from 205 down to 88. And there's another one for traffic misdemeanor, 488 to 174. So again, I think it's this restructuring. If you could just explain that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm happy to. What I can tell you that is that since the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office doesn't initiate the cases, I would have to speak to my partners like court services and my law enforcement partners to figure out the answer to that question. But there were significant changes in the laws beginning in 2020 for juvenile cases that caused many more to be deferred before being charged instead of petitions generating. And then when we came into office as well, we were the only jurisdiction in the state that was looking at juvenile petitions as opposed to letting court services, which has the diversion programs, actually make the determination. And they have the diversion programs, they have validated risk assessment tools, they have the officers and personnel to provide diversion. So we were the only state or the only jurisdiction in the entire Commonwealth that was not allowing court services to do their job. And so, we per the statute, we permitted the court services to make the initial determination based on their area of expertise.
Thank you.
But I'm not sure
some of them are not.
describes it
Some of them are juvenile, some of them are not, but that would be very helpful to know.
Right.
Thank you.
Mr. DeFerranti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate your points on the recruiting and the additional budget considerations. Want to look at that. Maybe you can help with one question. The estimate on the body-worn videos for next year goes down a little bit. And I don't know if you have a sense of why that is. Because it's been going up for a little bit. With experience, the personnel may be able to bring that down. I think it's 260. It just went slightly. The estimates are slightly down next year. And if you don't have a sense now, we can certainly follow up. But it's been going up, which makes sense. It may be that we were working out some of the kinks. Happy to follow up with you on that, though.
I'm happy to follow up, but can you point me to the columns that you're looking at, please?
Sure. Sorry. I think it's 263, 264.
263 and 264, just at the bottom.
At the end. So it's the last two at the bottom of 263 and the top of 264. The fiscal year 24 estimates are just a little bit down.
So I will let Ms. Saul Edwards answer that question because she actually knows the answer to that question.
Smart. So much. Sure. Oh, your mic.
Thank you so much, and I hope this helps. So we're still looking at estimates. So right now, we're mid-year 2023. It's likely that this figure actually could go up. This figure for the fiscal 23 represents, and going into fiscal 24, that estimate, we have only the actual figures of 22 to work with. We've got an estimate that's based on our own internal tabulation from our software that tracks the downloading, the number and the hours of the video. When you combine the 22 actual and the fiscal 23 estimate and then divide by 2 to get a fiscal 24 estimate, you end up with this fiscal 24 estimate number of roughly 16,500. Next year, when we do this budget exercise again, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're probably going to see higher figures because we'll have a full year of actual figures for fiscal 23 to work with.
Great. That's helpful. Gives me context. Thanks very much, Ms. Saul Edwards and Ms. Descon. Thank you.
So I'll just do one quick question as it relates to your request for an investigator. And please correct me if my understanding of any of this is wrong, as it is likely to be. But if it's primarily to support your work in investigating wage theft, how would that work with the state wage theft updates, which allow employees to actually initiate a lawsuit for suspected wage theft violations? How does this work in complement or in conflict with that?
Well, it would allow us to bring criminal penalties for people that are engaging in wage theft as opposed to merely civil penalties. And it would, it really, given that the county, I think the county should care about this because people don't normally pursue their own civil remedies, and it's very challenging to pursue civil remedies. And if we are focusing on equity, what we want to do is really focus on the people who are the most vulnerable and make sure that the government is doing its job to protect those people.
Thank you. Mr. Karantonis, do you have
just
hopefully a quick question?
It's not even a question, it's just a request. In the supporting measures where Mr. DeFerranti left it at in page 263, 64, where you account for the number of body-worn camera videos uploaded and the corresponding hours, I would ask you, if you can, to add also the number of incidents that this actually reflects, because, it makes a difference whether you have the same footage from 3 different involved people on one incident, or, it's indeed thousands of incidents that we have to account for. It would give us a good idea of how much the program is working to produce the accountability we want.
We will try.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Degani-Tafti. Thank you, Ms. Saul Edwards. We appreciate it greatly. And we'll now invite to join us from the nethermost regions in the room, our magistrate, Mr. Adam. Please come on up. You're next.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. And if you could turn your microphone on, we'll be ready to go.
Is it on now?
Now you need to press that button once more. There you go.
All right.
All right.
Every once in a while I do something right.
And we'll get your presentation loaded on the screen. So take your time.
Let me know when it's ready to go. All right. I said I represent the Magistrate's Office for the 17th Judicial District, Commonwealth of Virginia. That encompasses Arlington County and the City of Falls Church. We're the first judicial officers that anyone deals with, basically, for any criminal or mental health matter and many other types of matters. We deal with, not only can we deal with the matters that happen in Arlington and Falls Church, but we have authority to act in matters in the region and in other parts of Virginia as well under some circumstances. Next one, please. There's only 8.5 of us, 8 full-time people, including myself, and 1 person who is a part-timer. We operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I know you guys have heard this before. We didn't close on 9/11. We didn't close on January 6th of 2021. We haven't closed during the pandemic. Even when the COVID hit the office, we managed to find a way to stay open. And unlike many organizations, we could not do it by remote. We have to be there, and which may account for why about 2/3 of my office came down with COVID, but that's a story for another day. Basically, we issue all the warrants. We issue the search warrants, emergency protective orders. We're also the ones who issue emergency custody orders, ESROs, and temporary detention orders. We're in some ways the first line of defense for the judicial system, but also the first line of defense for the defendants or the people who people wish to detain mentally, because we're the ones who review the evidence and determine whether a person should be charged with a crime or detained for psychiatric treatment. So that we make sure that no one's rights are taken away from them, their liberties reduced without proper evidence and without the weighing in on it by an independent judicial officer. Next, please. One of the things I would, we deal with all sorts of people, and everyone who comes into our office, both as a witness, as a victim, as a defendant, or as someone seeking mental health problem, help because of a family member or friend. We're the ones who deal with everyone in a fair and honest way and try to apply the law as best we can. You've heard about different programs. I remind people that we have worked with the Sheriff's Office, and we have what they call the Sheriff Supervised Release Program, where people who might otherwise be detained can be released with terms and conditions and with the sheriff supervising them. And we have expanded that with a combination with the sheriffs and the mental health department to we have now called the Magistrate Post-Booking Project, where people have committed crimes who are obviously mentally ill. We can wrap them in services. Again, that is supervised by a combination of the Sheriff's Department and the Mental Health Department. And so again, people who are facing criminal issues, but the jail is not the right place for them. This is another program where we can release them, and they are better off, and I think the community is better served by them being diverted at this stage. I said we rarely ask for a whole lot, and we rarely get much. But we try to work within whatever budget we have, and it's next one, please. As you can see, you've asked in the past for figures. Even the past ones are to some extent rough because our computer system doesn't catch everything we do. Not everything we do is on the computer. So the amount of transactions we actually do every year is probably considerably higher than the ones you see there. The estimates in the future are my best guess as to what is going to happen. I can't tell you what mental health and criminal matters are going to happen in the future. A lot depends on many things, none of which are in the control of my office. But those are just rough estimates. And the other thing I would point out is what we run into is we try to limp along with whatever equipment we have until such time as it basically craters, and then we come hat in hand looking for money to replace it. And the supplies we use up are, as I said, I can't say we're going to use X number of things every month because sometimes we're very busy. During the pandemic, we didn't use nearly as much office supplies as we did once things started to open up. Criminal system was quieter mental health system was quieter during the pandemic. As soon as things started to open up, we saw all these things skyrocket. It's, like I said, we don't have a linear way of requesting things because we have no control over when our needs crop up. And I believe that's it. That is basically that, there's 8.5 of us. We work very hard, and we have to cover 2 jurisdictions plus help out other places at times. One of the things we've done that doesn't show up on our figures here is the Alexandria magistrate system was basically crippled by a combination of lost staff and people who were sick for the last couple of years. And we have done hearings for them and covered them for periods when they had no one at their office. They're now back close to full strength, but we've, we have had to do more with the same amount of people over the last several years that, and that's just, we managed to make it work.
Well, thank you for that. I'll start off with a couple of quick questions before turning it over to Vice Chair Garvey. So, we remember the example of the chairs, which, true to your word, you didn't come to us until they were falling apart. But I'm very much concerned about the lack of digitization that you described.
Our systems are run by the state. We have no control over them. We, churn out the processes on them, and but they, we have, they're all controlled by the Office of the Executive Secretary of the Supreme Court of Virginia. I can get some of the, I can't get, say, I couldn't add the Alexandria processes onto our Arlington figures because I'm not the chief for Alexandria. I couldn't go in and access those records. There are certain processes that we do by hand. It's hard to keep track of those because all the paperwork leaves the next day the court is open, goes to the court, or if it's an out of jurisdiction court, gets mailed out the next time the mail is available. So there's not a way to get exact figures. These are the best I can give you, and they're underestimates.
No, we appreciate it and weren't blaming you. I was actually going to provide you with the invitation to maybe think about next year coming with the digitization plan. But
part of the problem is that we're state officers, and the system we use is a statewide system that is run through the Supreme Court of Virginia website. All the magistrate systems, all the courts are all connected with it, and I can only pull certain things from it. And it's because some of the processes we do are by hand at times. They don't, and certain of the types of processes the Supreme Court of Virginia doesn't need to know about, so they don't keep records of them.
Got it. All right, Vice Chair Garvey.
All right, so this is a huge subject that maybe someone someday ought to delve into. Feels like we're maybe back still in the 18th century in some ways. And I guess did you get the chairs okay? I think you did.
Yes,
the least we can do is give you some chairs.
Yes,
right?
And we're working on some new ones now, actually.
Okay, all right.
Plenty of extra chairs.
Yeah. Anyway,
these are inexpensive ones.
I think I just want to say thank you, because Mr. Adam, this is the only time I see you pretty much every year. Come here, and you always
good thing for both of us, I guess.
Yes, it is. It is. You quietly kind of go over what you do, which is 24/7, 365 days a week. You're working away. I never hear about the Office of the Magistrate. I've never heard of a complaint. Maybe there's some things that go wrong, but it's just fascinating, and I think you just are doing a really crucial job. I think probably pretty well, because we never hear about a problem. Maybe it's so antiquated we wouldn't hear about it, but I think you are, and I want to thank you for your work. It feels like at some point this needs to be brought into the 21st century, but we probably won't do that today.
I was going to say, probably not in my lifetime, but
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. It's just, it's fascinating what you do. Thank you for what you do. And it does include working with the airport. I think you get people from the airport quite a bit.
yeah, we cover, let's see, along with Arlington Police, Arlington Sheriffs, Arlington Fire Department, because their arson squad goes through us.
yeah.
In fact, just before I came here, we were doing some search warrants for the Arlington Sheriffs, the Arlington Fire Department's arson squad. We also deal with Falls Church Police and Sheriffs. We deal with Metro Transit, MWA, State Police, the the other day, even the DMV investigators came in for state. We also deal with the Pentagon Police. We deal with other federal agencies periodically when they deal with the task forces, which operate out of the airports. They have federal task forces out of, and periodically they have like gang task forces that we deal with. So we deal with people from all over the state, along with the federal agencies sometimes, and yeah. So we deal with pretty much everyone that, and we dealt with Falls Church Fire Department's arson squad a couple weeks ago. So we deal with pretty much everyone who, any law enforcement or law enforcement adjacent organization that has that needs a state or local warrant or ordinance violation or search warrants or needs to run something by us or something of that nature.
Impressive.
So thank you. Very impressive. It's kind of everything everywhere all at once quietly, and we hear from you once a year. Thank you.
Terrific.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you on that,
Yes, thank
Mr.
you.
Adam. We will excuse you for the afternoon and invite our friends from the Juvenile and Domestic Relations District Court to join us. According to my notes, we are going to be addressed by the Court Services Director, Earl Conklin, but I see Judge Robb here as well as other guests. So everybody, come on over.
How's everybody
How you
doing?
doing?
Good. See you.
Wouldn't be surprised he has cool pens in his office.
I've never had the pleasure, but Kristen Dorsey, it's good to see you.
Mike check. I feel like, yeah, I don't.
All right. Are you ready?
May I introduce everyone?
Please.
We are the Juvenile Domestic Relations District Court. We focus on families, so when you invite us, you get the entire family. We have Judge Robb, who is our chief judge, Judge Chick, who's also a judge in our court. Also with us, we have the clerk of Juvenile Domestic Relations, Renika Lardy, and Rick Strobach, our deputy director, and Alex Espinoza-Smith, who is the person who brings the budget into life by managing it. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Judge Robb and Judge Chick.
And just very briefly, I would like to thank the county board, county manager for your continued support of our group homes and our after-school programs. They are at maximum capacity. I think there might be room for maybe one or two girls in the girls group home, but without your continued support, we would seriously be in trouble. They are wonderful programs. They are really helping out the young people here. So we're so very grateful for your continued efforts in that regard. We're also very grateful that there's going to be renovation, obviously, of the fourth floor in the courthouse, and that the county is supporting technology being brought to our floor, which is very much needed since we deal with so many cases that have a lot of participants, and without the adequate technology, it makes it seriously more complicated. But we're very grateful for all of those things. I think what our biggest concern right now is the significant increase, and maybe Mr. Conklin has the numbers of our cases involving children in need of supervision. Typically in the past, those were brought forward by the school for truancy. Right now, I would say probably over 90% of those petitions are being brought by desperate parents who are concerned about the use of fentanyl. And so they're literally in the courtroom begging Judge Chick and I to please save their child. So it's distressing because there are limited resources, obviously, for residential drug treatment programs for the children, and also for a lot of times there's a dual diagnosis with mental health component to it. I know DHS is working their hardest to expand their programs and to get the necessary personnel to help us out. But right now, I think that there's one intensive outpatient program in the county. And obviously, we have concerns. And I think Judge Chick can, parents are asking us to basically save their children. And Judge Chick has had at least 1 or 2 children beg for help, too. So, Judge Chick, if you'd like to share.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's very difficult, and I think we're doing our best to cook with the ingredients that we have, and when you have children coming in front of you and parents asking for treatment, and having to look at them and say, we've called over 50 different programs to try to get you into a program. And we're being told no, and then to have a kid ask you to place them in detention to save them from themselves it's heavy stuff, and so it's a challenge. But we are we're going to keep doing what we can do, and we're obviously very grateful for the board's commitment to addressing this issue too. So,
Thank you for that.
Okay, moving to our PowerPoint. I think the first thing we just want to highlight is, are we there yet?
It's there.
All right.
It'll advance on your direction.
Okay, so the themes that we're really trying to move forward with are diversion, evidence-based services, and safety within families in Arlington County. I think those are the overall themes of both the probation work that we see, of the work going on from the courts, and in our after-school community programs. Next slide, please. So our department is really comprised of 3 separate sections, divisions. We've got the judges and the judges' chambers, then we have the clerk of court, and then we have the court service unit, which provides probation and community programs. Within the judges' chambers, the key thing is that we're looking at in the next year is the courthouse renovations. I think by the time we come back next year, those will be underway. We will be displaced from our offices on the 4th floor and the courtrooms, and we'll be in the midst of probably a little bit of chaos leading up to the full renovation of the 4th floor. But we believe it's worth it, and will lead to an environment that's more conducive to our work with families. I think our judges are really driving that the 4th floor courtrooms at the end of the day be as trauma-informed in terms of their environment as we can possibly make. That's unusual. I don't know of another court that really is focusing that way, but it is something that I think in our renovations we're really trying to recognize that we work with kids that are coming with significant levels of trauma, and the environment, even in the courtrooms, can be provided in a way that's helpful. The clerk's office, I will say the most important thing to them is the supplement, and they're grateful for the way the county supports their salaries. And then in our court service unit, we have our early diversion services, which is really where we try and connect with kids and families before they even hit the intake level in our court. These cases, we do not put their names in the state database. We do not identify them in any way that would lead to some future higher level of service should they encounter the court. These are cases that are referred by maybe the police department have a contact with a youth, the schools encounter a youth, parents seeking help. We provide some case management support to them without entering them in the juvenile justice system. Our gang prevention efforts fall into this, our girls outreach program. Those are really a focus that we try and maintain. Then court intake, you heard from the magistrate. Well, our intake office is the juvenile level and the domestic relations level of that kind of a function. So again, they're 24/7. They answer the call from the police. When they have a youth in custody, they respond to, during business hours to families seeking to file protective orders or child support, child custody, those kinds of matters, or child welfare. And then our probation and parole services, these are for kids primarily that we're talking about here. We have, as of the end of January, we had 129 active cases under our supervision, overwhelmingly Arlington residents. I know there's often a question about who we see in the courts. I will say at this point in time, given the cases we're seeing from chins, the filing by parents, it is swung heavily towards Arlington residents looking for help at the JDR court. Then adult probation, these are largely domestic violence cases, and we have about, at any given time, a monthly average of 200 adults under our supervision. So those are the general numbers that we're seeing in court. They are trending upward, I would say, across the board, as we will talk in a minute. And then the other part of our court service unit is our community programs. Judge Robb was talking about them. Argus House and Aurora House are our group homes. I will say all of our programs are serving kids that present with fentanyl issues right now without the tools they really need to do it. We're having kids in our group homes without substance abuse treatment. I mean, historically, those may have been kids we would have declined to serve. We're having kids in our after-school programs that have fentanyl issues, and they're not engaged in substance abuse treatment along with those services. They're not getting the the behavioral health services that we need. So that's the challenges that we're facing across the board. Our after-school programs are at capacity. We'd love to find ways to expand them. They are the least disruptive to kids, and we're not pulling them out of their homes. We're not putting them in a group home. We're not putting them in detention. Long-term, they are living at home with their family members and coming to us after school and working on all the same challenges that they would have, they would work on without being removed from their home. So those are just excellent programs. I can say I don't know of many jurisdictions that offer those. I mean, we're grateful for those and would love to find a way to expand them. And then our Safe Havens program is the other community program, which really is essential in keeping people safe, that have protective orders, that have histories of domestic violence. They need visitation with their children, and they need to do custody exchanges, and they need a safe place to do it, and that's what Safe Havens provides. So we're really value that program and use it extensively. All, as Judge Robb mentioned, these programs are operating at capacity with waiting lists typically. So our budget highlights, I want to just emphasize, you're hearing fentanyl a lot in this discussion. It's not a word or a moment in time, a crisis that we can separate from our work right now. But the solution is definitely going to be multi-agency in our collaboration with the Department of Human Services, Child and Family Services, with the APS. There are great partnerships and discussions going on right now. There are some promising things on the horizon. The challenge for us is right now we were talking about the Chins cases that have been filed by parents. Right now we have 25 youth who are actively using fentanyl under our supervision, and we are using the tools that we have. We are seeing these kids who are typically not eligible for detention. We are seeing them go to detention out of safety concerns. We are seeing elevated work by probation officers, serving them intensely, working with their families. We're seeing them placed in our community programs. largely because they have fentanyl use and the elevated safety concerns that we all feel when that happens. Our detention center has become a de facto detox program for these kids, and it's just they're not getting medical assistance. I mean, they certainly are getting medical help from detention, but they're not getting medical assisted treatment for fentanyl use or opioid use, and that's concern. They're in distress when they go to detention. They're having active withdrawal. So those are the circumstances that we're in. So there is a lot of effort going in to build something. It's down the road. It's not immediate. We're struggling with the immediate needs of kids that we have on our caseload. I think that covers that page. So we're really, our focus on diversion and trying to work with kids in non-court ways. The expanded capacity to serve family, our caseloads are going up. When 10 years ago we had probably 15 juvenile probation officers. Today we have 7. We have reduced those. That's how we started the group home, or that's how we started our Young Achievers program. We've shifted resources as caseloads went down over the last decade. We shifted to new services. We have a couple of vacancies we're filling. Our caseloads are definitely climbing. The courts are very busy. Judges are on the bench we're hearing cases, they're starting cases at 8 o'clock and they're going till after 5 many days. So it really is a lot of demand on the juvenile court system right now. And then parent engagement is always a focus for us. So in terms of our equity issues, we all went to the Georgetown Racial and Ethnic Disparities Certificate Program years ago, and we still continue to work on what we developed in that program. Our Racial and Ethnic Disparities team in JDR consists of both judges, myself, the head of the Community Services Board, the head of Child and Family Services, member from the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, representative from the Public Defender's Office, Police Department, and APS. So we've got leaders from all of those organizations that get together and look at what's going on in juvenile court and our legal system related to kids, the child serving agencies that are part of that discussion, with a goal of trying to reduce the disparities that we have in our court system. We have disparities of the kids that we have seen these parents filing CHINS cases. I've got the number, but I believe it is 90% of them are Hispanic parents filing with our court system to get help for their kids. That's what we're seeing in the juvenile court. Some of the youth do not speak English, which exacerbates the problem of trying to find services for them. Programs that can serve a Spanish-speaking only youth is a big challenge. So when it comes to equity, we know that the majority of the kids we see come to intake, processed through our system, are placed in detention, are largely kids of color. That is something we are trying to address. The way we address it in our Racial and Ethnic Disparities team is by looking at the decision points within our system, so that when we look at what happens at intake, we look at it by race, ethnicity, gender, geography, where the kid lives, and offense. And by looking at those things, we can see if there are disparities in who gets access to diversion, who gets sent to detention. We can look at those things by race and ethnicity, and then when we look at offense, we can then tell from that whether or not kids with similar offenses are being handled in a disparate way. So that's kind of our initiative. The task of trying to reduce who comes to our front door in juvenile court is a big one, and that's a county effort. That's not something we can tackle by ourselves, and I think that's where the team that we have in juvenile court is helpful. Data drives that. Since we started this team, the data we're collecting and processing related to disparities in our system has improved dramatically as a result of this Racial and Ethnic Disparities team. So we're not where we want to be. We don't like the numbers that we see. We don't like the disparities we see. But now we're at least at a point where we can identify them. We can look at it with data, and we can meet as a team and as a county and try and talk about solutions to address it. I don't know if either of you want to address that red team or not, if there's anything else I left unsaid.
I think you said it pretty well, Earl.
Next page, you know, I don't know there are any dramatic changes here. The IPE program, we're grateful that that funding is included and increased. That stands for the Intervention, Prevention, and Education Program, which is another early diversion program. If a youth is identified as having indicators of gang involvement or risk for gang involvement, that is a program that we contract for with Northern Virginia Family Services, and they provide a 90-day, sometimes longer, intervention, intensive intervention with kids and their parents, going to the home, providing case management, providing support, education, group work, referrals, whatever's needed, without those youth having to come into the court system to get those services. So it's a critical program. We haven't raised the funding in 10 years, and so there's an increase of $30,000 this year going to that, and we're appreciative of that in the recommended budget. Our gang numbers are going up. IPE is also at capacity with a waiting list this year. That's concerning. We haven't had that level of referrals. These largely come from the school system, identifying youth, the court system, parents reaching out for help, or the court, police, schools, parents, and our court system all make referrals to this program for kids, and it is, you know, it's been at capacity all year and has a waiting list. So there's like a 3-month delay in getting kids into the program. So we're seeing that challenge in our gang prevention efforts. Our gang specialist is getting referrals and outreach from schools. We do groups. He does groups at the schools. He does work with parents, and the referrals to him have consistently increased. The demand for intervention groups at the schools. He goes to the school and we'll do like a lunchtime group with kids once a week, with kids that are identified when they have enough. And it's very effective, but the requests for those continue to grow. So it's the issues around gangs, I would say, at the prevention level are increasing.
Mr. Conklin, if I could just interrupt you for a moment. What's really very exciting about that program is a lot of the youth that successfully completed it come back and talk to the other kids in the program, and they volunteer at the annual soccer tournament. So it's a program that kind of gives back to the program because of the successful youth that were serviced by the program. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Thank you. No, please, I'm glad.
Something positive, it's nice to hear.
So the other changes here are, whenever the state employees get an increase, we get an increase for the reimbursement to the county for our probation staff. So that shows up here, as well as some changes in the allocation of the Safe Havens grant. This page, I think I've addressed these concerns. It really gets back to the increase in the number of cases filed for children in need of supervision or services, largely by parents. The school system is the other place that can file these for truancy. This year to date, compared to last year to date, there's been an increase of 96% in the number of those cases coming into the court. And those are a number of kids, not, so multiple charges. We're talking about the number of kids have increased by 96%. That's a pretty dramatic increase. Just in terms of raw numbers, they went from 26 a year ago to 51 in the current year. We went from 17 filed by parents or on youth who were Hispanic from 17 to 30 this year. So that's an increase of even more than 96, or than it's a huge increase. So, and it is parents filing out of desperation to get help for their kids. That's what's driving this, and it is fentanyl and the lack of their ability to find services. What's concerning is our numbers were trending in the right direction when it comes to the reduction of kids involved in the court, to the reduction in the use of detention. Those numbers have shifted, and they're now trending in the wrong direction, and that's something that we're concerned about. It's not police arresting kids and bringing them into the court system that's driving our numbers. It's parents asking for help, which is a whole different thing. And they're asking for help, doesn't mean there's not a system problem, The system problem is that court's becoming the first resort because resources that we used to turn to are not available at the level. So court is the first resort, not the last resort, which is where we want it to be, the last resort for parents. This just shows the changes in detention. I think this was FY23 year-to-date. I think through January, it continues to go up. If you look at Arlington's use of our detention center, you can see it's, last year, some of 22 was pandemic driven. Cases in court were down, at an abnormally low level during the pandemic, which is a positive thing, but they've spiked back up to where they were in 21 and beyond. So they're like double of what, that's the average daily population. So that tells you on average how many kids Arlington has living in the detention center on that day. So the average so far this year is over 8 kids, almost 9. And that's more than twice what we had in 21 and, 4 times what we had in 22. Last thing I will say about the detention center is the types of kids we're placing there also places stress on them. They're watching these kids with withdrawal. They're struggling with the trauma needs of the kids that we're placing there and of their substance abuse concerns. So not only the numbers going up, but the challenges of those kids and what they're dealing with is going up. Our mental health services to our kids in detention is met through Child and Family Services, DHS. They have a therapist assigned to work with our kids that are in the detention center, which is a very positive thing. It's largely crisis-oriented, but they will really respond to the needs of kids. So we're very appreciative of that provision by DHS. And then the detention center has still got this renovation looming on the horizon. So.
Indeed. Thank you, Judges Robb and Chick and Mr. Conklin. I think absent constraints, we would love to engage with you for a long time on these matters, but today we do have constraints, and we also do have 3 other offices that are looking to have their opportunity. So colleagues, I'll ask if you have any questions or comments that you keep them tight. Mr. DeFranti.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think there's, as I understand it, there's 2 bodies of work. There's that we've been working on in the last weeks. There's some tightening up and some work DHS is doing with our schools. Separately, I think I recall that there's some, there may be some capacity for outside referrals. And so I don't know whether this is for you, Mr. Conklin, or Mr. Manager, but clearing those barriers for accessing all supply for those 20 to 30 kids who are addicted, who need help. Do I have that right? Have I described sort of one body of work as, are there outside services, and have I described the body of work correctly? I think one is for Mr. Conklin and Mr. Manager, and I'm happy to, I hope you don't mind me just naming the challenge, and I'm happy to engage further after this session, but I thought those 2 quick questions could be helpful. And I don't know, they would go to Mr. Conklin and then the manager. I don't know who wants to go first.
I would just add, Earl can add more to this. I think you're actually going on a tour later this week with Michelle to look for additional space for the day program. Yes. That's one thing that we're focused on, but that's one of many.
I think the challenge is that we're really facing is the level of need these kids, these youth are presenting with typically goes beyond basic outpatient services.
Yeah.
It escalates to the need for intensive outpatient or residential treatment. And those are usually provided under contract with vendors. And the challenge we have is there are insufficient vendors available to provide that service, even with the funding to obtain that in those ways. It's difficult to find vendors that are available.
So that would be a DC, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, the state of Virginia, everywhere it's difficult to find those vendors.
I think there's some great work, I know, being done in DHS to try and identify and reduce and address the barriers for some of those vendors. Historically, we haven't had a lot of youth that would need substance abuse, residential level of substance abuse treatment.
Sure.
So I think that's part of the reasons more is not currently in place.
Great. I'll follow up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Garvey.
Yeah, I think, thank you so much for this very sobering presentation. What I'm hearing bottom line is, I mean, the problem is acute, it's real, it's big, and it's really important. Just doing more money isn't going to solve it because there isn't space, there aren't people, there aren't, so that it's a systemic thing. I hear see the head nods, because I think we're willing to do quite a bit to try to, I know the managers, we all are, but we're up against, we're having to build a whole system and machine that we don't have available yet. So anything we can do to help, let us know as we continue to move forward. I think everybody's really committed, so thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Indeed, sobering presentation. And we hear it from parents as well. And to be honest with you, Mr. Conklin, for decades, parents were hearing, unless your child is in the system, I cannot help it. So, that comes by, among many other things, comes back and bite us today with the confidence that some parents may have in this last resort that was presented as the only resort just a few years ago. I was in front of these conversations. I want to ask you something very specific before I thank you so much for the enormous work that you do in Argus and Aurora and even in the juvenile detention center. That still beats me. I don't understand how you can even remotely provide detox services in that setting. I just don't understand that. But nevertheless, shelter care. So I see here a significant increase in bed days. How are we capacity-wise in this?
So the shelter care is operated by the Juvenile Detention Commission and is largely funded by the City of Alexandria. We don't purchase specific bed space, like we don't buy a number of beds in the shelter care. We used to do that. More than a decade ago, we had like 4 beds that were committed to Arlington. We fully funded them. Lack of use over time, we've reduced that, and now we pay as we need. We haven't had a problem accessing needed bed space, but I think as the Detention Commission looks at changes in the way it works, we may come back and reformulate how our agreements with the City of Alexandria and the Detention Commission around our use of that space. It's important because when kids don't need to be in juvenile detention, we don't want them in juvenile detention. And having a short-term, non-secure, alternative like shelter is essential for both us and Child and Family Services, child welfare, when they need to have a shelter place for a youth. So,
yeah, and I think that this is a model that could work with our still atrophic way to to respond with services beyond external services for treating these juveniles. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate it. Sorry we can't continue the conversation here, but we will elsewhere. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
And I see Mr. Henshaw is here. Welcome you to come up to the front. I'll be right back. You're next.
You get the whole table to
I
yourself.
know. I thought I was going to be the cleanup batter.
You must be important.
Mark, would you take that one off so Brian's not in stereo?
So all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, county manager, member of the public, anyone who's watching. Thank you for hearing the Arlington General District Court clerk's office today. Appreciate it. I'm Brian Henshaw, clerk of court for Arlington General District Court. Arlington GDC consists of 3 judges, Chief Judge Daniel Lopez, Judge Fran O'Brien, Judge Rucker, and also our court administrator, who is Tarsha Fisher, who works in the judicial chambers. Next slide, please. And we can go ahead and skip to the 3rd slide. We've sat through many of these presentations. I'll be happy to review what the General District Court does, but if you all, I can basically sum it up by looking at the slides. So we'll move on to our budget highlights, if that's all right with you all. Sure. All right. So next slide, please. All right. I am excited to say that in the past year, we've successfully launched electronic filing or e-filing through the Arlington County website through a collaborative effort with the Department of Technology Services through the Digital Innovation Team. We have received extremely positive feedback from the public and the legal communities for its ease of use and connectivity. This was created at minimal cost to the county. I think that's what's important for you all to know, and that the only expense was truly basically the time we worked on creating the functional abilities. A lot of these abilities were based upon the web service that the county was already operating and implementing through other departments. So briefly, our system just requires a pre-existing case, but it saves time and is easier to submit records and case materials for cases. Some examples of what we're currently being accepted are motions, notices of appearances, continuances, bill of particulars, and several other filings that was only accepted in the past in person at the front counter. We continue to explore more options and feel that eventually we will get to original filings coming in through e-filing as well. We also will continue looking at other innovative ways to make the general district courts more accessible. Next slide. With regard to focus on the equality, we're continuing with our behavioral health docket. We've explained this in years past. It is still very successful. It is a true collaborative effort with many different departments throughout the county, which includes the Department of Human Services, Public Defender's Office, Jail Forensics Services staff, Commonwealth Attorney's Office, supervised probation offices, and community corrections, as well as both Arlington County Police Department and Arlington County Sheriff's Department. We've continued. One of the things that came out of the pandemic was the legal services in Northern Virginia to provide basically any kind of advice to tenants with regard to unlawful detainers with regard to our civil court practices. This is cooperative and responded to with the Tenant Landlord Commission and to revamp our cover sheet for filing UDs placed on that LL with notice of requirements prior to filing an eviction action. So we've continued to offer that aid outside of our civil courtrooms. Next slide. Budget summary. Our budget summary really does not present any new changes that our proposals from years past, and is mainly established to cover everyday expenses and salaries. There are some noted losses in revenue due to the significant decline in traffic summons, but this trend is already starting to begin to rebound. We think this is kind of post-pandemic, basically, and also our sheriffs and police departments being, in a crisis for personnel, basically. We continue to monitor this, but please understand that GDC does not have any control over the number of cases year to year, and that is not our primary focus of our office. Next slide. As always, we're appreciative of the continued support of the courtroom technology improvements and the equipment that is needed. Need has arisen, but I can confidently say at the end of this fiscal year, all 4 of our courtrooms will be outfitted with a Microsoft Hub, which allows virtual hearings and other technological needs as it relates to providing access to justice. We ask for continued support as new technological needs arises. We also continue to appreciate the support of the employee supplement for GDC staff employees. By providing this supplement, it provides staff members with more comparable salary for living within the area or surrounding areas, and also the supplement provides an extra incentive for hiring highly qualified staff. Finally, the clerk's office would also is very supportive of the continued courthouse renovations that are currently ongoing. I know JDR just mentioned we are working very much, we're playing the sandbox is what I would say, and so with all of our neighbors and other colleagues throughout the courthouse as needs arise. And so the only thing I would like to conclude with is I'd like to just let you know that on behalf of the General District Court Clerk's Office, I would like to publicly thank the DTS Department for their continued support and assistance in upgrading our presence on the Arlington County webpage, and they're creating better access to justice for the public. I would also like to thank our facilities for all their assistance in helping us maintain our office and our facilities, and that they are always highly responsive and willing to help us whenever issues arise. That is all I have. We try to keep it pretty short and simple for you.
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Henshaw, and appreciate your patience in waiting towards near the very end of this work session. Colleagues, are there any questions about the work of the GDC? Yeah. Very good.
All right.
This is helpful. Great presentation. We appreciate knowing that maybe one good thing that came out of the pandemic was maybe it provided you a little bit of the space to dig into the e-filing project.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So.
And one thing I would say, I can't really comment to the magistrates, but one of the things I'd say from a state standpoint, I think it is important to know that the pandemic actually did thrust OES, the Office of Executive Secretary, into a lot of new directions. The technology is coming. I think it kind of pushed them a little bit further. I don't have a problem saying historically, Virginia is conservative moving through the judicial processes. But with that being said, I think it's pushed us in some new directions, and going to some of the conferences, now that we're starting to finally get back to conferences, we're seeing a lot of this being presented to us. So I think there are changes on the way. We do get handcuffed because you're talking a little bit from, pardon the pun, there was no pun intended there. But what I was going to say is we do sometimes run into the fact that you are dealing with the whole state, and in various different areas of the state, there's a challenge. So meeting the needs here might be different than meeting needs elsewhere in Virginia.
Thank you for that. Thank
you.
All right.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.
Good to see you.
And we'll now invite our clerk of the circuit court, Paul Ferguson, and I see Ms. Dietrich is also here. Welcome. Come on up.
I don't know if Mr. Henshaw told you, but he was a town manager of Haymarket, so he understands what all of you do. What Mr. Schwartz did.
We have a special. Didn't know that.
Okay, yeah. Well,
might want to adjust that chair, Mr. Clerk.
Well, I noticed the Commonwealth Attorney, maybe it's good for me to be lowered down an inch or two. Thank you for the opportunity to be before you. I know the hour is late. Any success that the Circuit Court Clerk's Office has is due to the support we receive from this great county government. We thank the Department of Management Finance for assisting us during this budget season, as in past ones. HR has been extremely helpful to us this year and over the past couple of years with hiring challenges that we've had. And you as a board have been supportive to our office, so thank you. Would you like me to waive my presentation and just take questions, or?
No, you've waited. You have your time. No, please.
I'll do my best to keep it short.
If you find deficiencies as you're doing it, I'm not going to object, but please.
Yeah, okay. Well, this first slide I thought would be interesting. Christina Dietrich assembled this. This is, instead of me reading the mission statement, it puts a lot of the words that we use and interact with. And so if you take a look at it, I could spend a lot of time just going through all those different words. But take a look at it. If anything catches your eye as far as one of the words being special to you, let's talk about it. It doesn't have to be during this work session, but that's a lot of what we do there up on the screen. Next slide. I talked last year about the civil case numbers being sort of like a straight line upwards, like a hockey stick. Fortunately, that's leveled off, which is good news. It's down 11%, but even with down 11%, it's still at historically high levels. Our civil division remains very busy. Our e-filing system, there's a lot of choice of venue, especially for collection type of cases, and our e-filing system's such that I think it's easier to use to go to Arlington than really anywhere else in Northern Virginia. That could change over time, but for right now, I see that being constant. Criminal numbers are up 10%, but if you look at 10-year numbers, they're still at historically low levels. So That's kept us busy with that slight increase. That third number there is not a pretty one. It has to do with interest rates really killing off the refinance market. So things have slowed as far as land transactions. It's not a good sign overall for what the economy could be in the future, and I'm just hoping that that's not the case. But that number there is cause for worry. We're bringing in less revenues to the county because of that. Next slide. One of the things I appreciated the Commonwealth Attorney putting up that picture of the expungement fair. I had even forgotten about that since it was months ago. We're constantly trying to think of ways we can help the public when there's a limit to what we can do. People come to us needing a lawyer, needing legal advice. We can't do that. We try to direct them to the right place. We've got a law library that we now have 2 new young law librarians, and they're working, and we had Patty Petrosoni, our former law librarian, who just recently retired. Legal Services of Northern Virginia was mentioned by Mr. Henshaw. They have been a really good partner, and they have assisted a number of people for us, but there's only so much they can do. So we don't have a magic answer, but we do our best to get people the information they need. We have a self-represented divorce packet that gives people all the forms. I don't know that I could do it myself if I had to go through it, but it's all their form is the best we can do. And I serve as the clerk's representative to the Access to Justice Commission on a statewide basis. So I continue to pick up things and learn there. This is something that was chaired by Chief Justice Goodwin, which was why I was interested in participating, one of the reasons. And now he's handed over to Justice McCollum, but it's a high-level group. Christina, did I cover everything on there? You want me to? Good enough? Okay. Next slide. We really don't have much in the way of changes in this year's budget. That you, as a board, have been very generous as far as compensation, and that drives some numbers up. I talked about the decrease in land records transaction, and that's why those revenue numbers are down. Next slide. We are going to get a new land record system, which should excite our real estate assessments office and those over here on the county side that work with us as far as property transactions. It's in the RFP process right now, and so I can't talk a lot about it, but hopefully by this time next year we'll have it up and running, and there'll be a lot of improvements for the public also. It's something we're very excited about in our office. One of the things we are trying to continue to do, and you have been very helpful in providing funds to backscan records. We started digital in 2013, but that didn't take care of the back files. So we've been slowly and surely, we have everything backscanned in our land records area, which is important for the public and title searchers, but we've still got a long way to go for criminal and civil cases. So if you ever have any extra funds, that is a place you could direct them. I'm not saying it's there this year, but we continue to try to allocate a portion of our budget towards that. It also protects against degradation. There are going to be some renovations going on in the courthouse that's been mentioned. I hope eventually it comes to the 6th floor and we're able to rework some of the space, but I think we're rightly so not at the top of the list for the renovations. Next slide. I think that's it. Any questions for me?
Terrific. Sure. I'll start us off, and then Vice Chair Garvey. So with the land records and the decline, could you just provide us, not now but later, with how that looked month by month? There's been some sort of popular analysis that there was this cratering of real estate activity, but then as people became less spooked and realized the world hadn't been entirely destroyed, that there was an uptick towards year's end? I would want to see if that was reflected in what we saw locally.
We can do that. It was starting to slow down a little bit last budget cycle, but I had no idea that it was going to slow to the extent it has.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, it's not at 2008 levels. That was awful.
Right.
So there's still some hope, but we can provide that data for Mr. Dorsey. Yeah.
Thank you.
We were told by staff that they wanted us to be prepared and not to have to cause them to do a lot of follow-up, but that's something we didn't come with, and we.
This will be an easy one, right?
Yeah, it is easy. It is easy, and we don't need help from DMF fund. We have that. We have the information.
And I'll just note a factoid that just jumped out at me. It really means nothing. It is entirely a factoid, but in calendar 22, we reached the point where we issue more concealed carry permits than we actually have marriage licenses. I don't know what that means about a community, but it doesn't sound great. I'll turn it over to you.
I'm going to pick up right where you were, Mr. Chair. So looking at the land records, I mean, actually, it was a tremendous amount in 2021.
Yeah.
So it looks to me like Savvy, Arlington, and they're in there doing everything all at once, and then they're just getting ready, and now they're holding back, and once the feds change it, they'll be ready to go back again. That's my guess. So it'll be interesting to look at the month by month.
Yeah, but the interest rates are been raised pretty high, so they have to.
Yeah.
I know. But every little bit that comes down will help. At any rate, the question I had, which is actually where you left, so marriage licenses, yes, there was that, but they also plunged from 2019. So what's going on there?
What we did was, with COVID, we started doing marriage licenses by appointment. And we decided to continue that, giving preference to Arlington and Falls Church residents. We still do plenty of marriage licenses for those that live elsewhere, but we want to make sure that
So
our
2019 had more people outside of Arlington, is what you're telling me?
we used to just have a ton of people come from all over to get a marriage license in Arlington because it was the most convenient place. They did, so we just decided that we wanted to focus more on our own residents.
I don't know. We could hire an Elvis
And that was
impersonator and make
with
some money.
COVID.
Who knows?
Well, it's
Fascinating.
a
All right.
lot harder to get a marriage license in D.C. and Maryland than it is in Virginia.
Yeah.
And then Arlington is the most convenient
Of everything,
place
yes.
for people to come.
I just see a whole
Yeah,
logo
so-
thing going on. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's great. I was just curious about that. Thank you.
But you won't hear any complaints from your constituents about getting a marriage license. They apply, we get them.
Right,
one
but we
very
might hear
quickly.
them from other people, but they're not our
They're not
concern.
going to complain.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, we try to get to them too, but we just try to get to the Arlington ones
That-
first.
love it.
And Falls Church.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Mr. DiFerenti.
Well, I'm happy to have contributed to one of the calendar
marriage
year
license.
2020,
Yes,
1,358. So I don't have questions. I'm mindful of time, but thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
And Mr. Carantonis, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Ferguson, for the, as somebody who had to rely on a reliable but was unreliable bus service to get to the place where to get a marriage license, I really appreciate the fact that it's metro accessible. That's a great thing. I wanted to go back to the concealed handgun permits. Of course, this is still a lot. It's over, 1,200 estimated, 1,255 actual. We had a conversation here on, fostering or supporting a new gun safety culture and making it more popular. So my question to you is it at all possible within your purview when you issue a permit to also furnish a sort of a brochure that informs the new legal gun owner about things like safe storage and safe handling?
It's a good idea, Mr. Carantonis. We'd be glad if you have something like that.
I have a couple of examples.
Okay.
Just for you, we can. I would love to get back to you on
Okay.
this, so that with every license comes some some instructions on how to
We'll,
keep guns
this is an example,
safe.
but we'll wait for, maybe something that was kind of smaller than a piece of paper, like just like
Yeah,
like some
we can discuss
bookmark.
about the format,
We
yeah.
hand those type of things out for legal services and for other self-represented, and that would be easy for us to give out.
Okay, thank you.
Good idea.
Welcome to gun ownership.
We're a full service board, right?
Just make sure you don't kill anybody.
Okay, on that note, thank you.
Thank you for once again for all your support.
Appreciate it.
Here.
And cleanup, Mr. Haywood. Welcome.
Thank you. Oops. So, thanks for having me. It's nice to see you all again. Starting with our PowerPoint, I'm going to go off track as I often do, but because I want to give you an example or some examples of the critical roles we're playing in a lot of the county-funded diversion initiatives. But if you might move to the next slide, we'll kick it off by staying on track. So that is our department's mission. Can we skip to the next also? And this is our overview, which sort of restates that in longer form, which our goal is we aspire to be a model of zealous client-centered defense. And in Arlington, I think because we have the support of the county, we also aspire to be an agent of positive change more broadly in the local criminal legal system. So I'm sure you are wondering how we're doing with that mission and how county funding is helping us achieve those goals. And the good news is that we're doing very well, and that is with your considerable help. I know I say that every time I'm here. I can't say it enough. It really makes an absolutely huge difference. So thank you so much for pledging your support to our office and to the overall mission of our community to make our criminal legal system more humane. But there's sort of a but to this. An irony of indigent defense is that the better that you get at your jobs, the harder those jobs become. So if you're taking a holistic approach, there's just a lot more to do. And I think it's useful to consider what the opposite of zealous client-centered defense looks like. You may or may not have heard the sort of term or phrase, meet 'em and plead 'em. So this is a term used with respect to like really bad defense attorneys. What it's implying is the person just shows up for court, they greet their client, shake their hand, and just pleads the case out. That person will have done no fact investigation, they would have done no mitigation investigation, no legal research, no trial prep, just shows up and wings it. And often I think that results in them trying to strong-arm clients into giving up their rights and pleading guilty. It's not the way things should be done. And it's actually a main reason that sometimes they call it as a factor in the trial penalty. But it's one reason that our system has become as punitive as it has, because defense attorneys sometimes aren't playing their constitutionally intended role. What do we do, though? We want to be a model office. So we investigate every case. We learn about our clients. We learn about their backgrounds, the reasons they find themselves in court, their physical, mental health, their education, all those things that we might need to know in order to convince a judge or a prosecutor to be empathetic or show grace. We have to learn that stuff, and then we fight zealously in court. And I think critically for the purposes of the county support, we do everything we can to make the system better. Now, we're not always going to be on the same page as everybody else, because obviously our first responsibility is to our clients' stated interests, but a lot of the times their stated interests sync up quite well with the prosecutor's interests or the court's interests, because we all want the same thing. We all want real community safety, and that's achieved through our clients having access to the services they need and being treated in a humane way that allows them to move on in their lives. So like I said, it's a holistic approach, and it isn't easy, but it's what our clients deserve, and it's what's required for the county to achieve its goals. As I noted, the county's pledged to improve the system. One way they've done that is to, you all have done this with your commitment to essentially decriminalize mental illness and substance disorder. It's a huge commitment that the county has made. So much, I know, the money that goes into the sheriff, the DHS, Commonwealth's attorney, the courts, so much of that is pledged to this sort of thing, the overlap between the criminal legal system and behavioral health, mental illness, substance use disorder. I would suggest to you, and I don't know if it's ever been how often it's phrased this way, but in some ways we are, I don't know, I wouldn't say the most important, but the most essential link in that chain. Meaning that if we're not doing our jobs well, those things just don't happen. Before I get into more detail on that, some context for you. I think you know that Arlington has traditionally and in recent years had a disproportionate number of people with serious mental illness involved in its criminal legal system. That remains the case. I think my view is that people with serious mental illness remain over-policed in Arlington. COVID made that situation much worse, as has the crisis in funding and staffing of our behavioral health infrastructure. So when that falls apart, then the only thing that police and courts can rely on, unfortunately, is jails and prisons. The county still sends more competency cases to Western State Hospital, like people who need to be restored to competency, sends more people to Western State Hospital as a result of criminal cases than any other jurisdiction per capita, at least. And I believe around half of the jail takes some type of psychotropic medication. The county has taken many admirable steps to improve that situation. We now have a really good behavioral health docket. We have a tremendous bond diversion program. We have a drug treatment court. We have we're still working on appropriate mental health crisis response, but that's gotten better. And lots of commitments to reentry planning. And in addition to the formal diversion initiatives, we also there's much more openness to informal diversion. And just, I think, there's more of a spirit of evidence-informed, humane approach focused on rehabilitation. And the judges and Commonwealth attorneys are much more open to that at this juncture. But again, before I got into that, what I prefaced that with was that a lot of the burden, I think a huge amount of the burden, probably more than you think, falls on us to make sure those programs and initiatives actually work. Because without us doing our jobs well, there are no clients for those programs to serve. We're the ones that facilitate that. And also, even if somebody else, other people, or if we're not doing our jobs well, even if we're getting people into the programs, who knows if it's going to be the right people. And that's when there's limited resources, you need to maximize the efficacy of the program. And so many of these programs, they depend on these risk needs responsivity assessments, determining who really needs it. And a lot of this falls on us as well, to determine who legally, who's going to benefit from this, who from their standpoint of their background, their character, their whatever it's going into their life at this point, who are the people that really need to be in that program. And so what I mean when I say that without us, people don't get in that program is because, like prosecutors can't speak with our clients. So I know like the Commonwealth Attorney's Office recently got a grant funded position for a social worker. They want to work on bond diversion, but that social worker is unable to really do that in a direct way. If we had a social worker, we could certainly do that. We would benefit from something like that. But we're the ones who have to have those conversations. We have the attorney-client privilege. They trust us. They trust us more even than the mental health professionals in the jail, because they know that the information they share with us is going to be privileged. We're not going to share it with anyone else, and that we can be trusted with it. So we're the ones that have to learn that information about them, build those bonds of trust, give them good counsel, and encourage them to make not just good choices for their criminal cases, but for their lives. And we do view that as our responsibility, not just to win cases, but to make sure our clients have good life outcomes. And this burden actually has been made worse recently. I know I mentioned the crisis in behavioral health care. So that affects the local jail. I know you know that it affects Sequoia. They have that whole wing of the Sequoia building that for a lot of the time just isn't staffed because they can't staff it. And we have VHC that's going to expand, but hasn't expanded yet. So we have in the jail you see They have one bond diversion planner. She's amazing, Maggie Gassert, but they could use 5. So we have to be on our game massively. And we have to do some of those things that aren't being done because other parts of the system, aren't staffed, or maybe there aren't the services there for them. A good example right now, and we do, by the way, take full advantage of the programs and the commitments y'all have made. So a good example is behavioral health docket. We're really pleased with how it's been going. And almost the entire docket right now is made up of people who are our clients. So we are getting them into that program, and it's going really well. I thought that it might be useful to sort of walk you through, and I did this with Mr. Schwartz, but I thought it might be good just briefly walk you through a case example of what this looks like in practice. And this is sort of a pastiche, so I'm not violating any client confidences, but this is realistic. This is something that happens not just on a monthly basis, but probably weekly, if not a daily basis. So imagine a man in his 60s who has a lifelong history of schizophrenia. And it's been so bad, it's pretty difficult to medicate, but if he's medicated, doesn't get in a lot of trouble, maybe isn't able to be fully functional on his own, but it certainly helps. This person has a long criminal history, but none of it's violent, mostly things like nuisance crimes, trespassing, things of that nature. The person is known to DHS, so it's a person who receives services, but maybe every 10 to 12 months or so, there's a slip up. Maybe he misses his injectable medication, then becomes street homeless, and maybe starts acting out. And the way that might look in practice is the person maybe starts wandering into the street, yelling at people, or sits on the sidewalk, yelling at people. There's problems with the social behavior, and that alarms the community. Right. So in one of those episodes, this person, say it's a Monday before Thanksgiving, we'll say, because a similar case happened around then. He's arrested for trespassing because he goes to a local nail salon and starts banging on the door, and he won't leave when he's asked. So the police have to arrest him. There are no beds at VHC, so they have to take him to the jail. He gets booked on a trespassing warrant, and because of how he's presenting, the magistrate doesn't let him out. So the magistrate thinks, I can't let this person back into the community. Here's what happens next. So he's arraigned by the court. We are appointed. So this would be, if he's arrested Monday night, we're appointed on Tuesday morning. In this case, say, we learn maybe by 10 in the morning, 11 in the morning, that we get that case. Because we've streamlined our pretrial advocacy, an assigned bond attorney knows to expect those cases around that time. And that person will then tries to contact this individual using the jail phones. But he can't get through because the front desk deputy says that he won't come to the phone. Like, he's too symptomatic, he's not going to come to the phone. Once we realize that, the bond attorney then contacts one of our mitigation staff and says, hey, I need you to go over and see him immediately because we need to find out what's going on. Luckily, our mitigation staff, who already does mental health rounds on a weekly basis, was planning on going to the jail anyway. So she goes over, she goes up to the unit, one of the crisis units, and speaks to the food sludge, to the gentleman, and is able to quickly observe that he is acutely symptomatic, very paranoid and angry, does not seem medicated, and needs to be stabilized. So the mitigation person tells the attorney that, and the attorney then reaches out immediately. Again, we're working on a very tight time schedule because a bond motion would have to get in by about 3:30. Reaches out to the bond diversion program, asks for assistance with treatment and treatment referral and a housing placement. Also reaches out to the mental health staff at the jail. Through them, learns that the client actually had just recently missed their injectable medication, but then through that conversation, they have a further conversation with that gentleman, and he agrees to take his meds again. We, with the help of the bond diversion program, then secure a shelter placement. Bond diversion confirms the shelter placement, and with that work complete, we file a bond motion to be heard Wednesday morning. The judge seems satisfied with the work we've done, all of us together, collaboratively, and he's out in time for Thanksgiving. You can keep following that case in some cases like this because bond diversion is viewed as sort of a precursor to the behavioral health docket. Somebody in that situation might then have a referral to behavioral health docket where they're going to do their evaluations, but we then also have to meet with the person, go over the expectation for the program, and then be there with them in court to help them get them into the program. So I think you can probably see just through that, and that happens all the time. That is a very typical case. And unless we know what we're doing, unless we have those relationships, unless we understand the treatment services available, it's just not going to happen. So all these reasons, this is why our initial ask was different. It's for true pay parity with the Commonwealth, and we're still far behind in that regard. And I know you've heard the pitch, you understand the rationale. We fully understand it's a tight budget year, and appreciate at least that funding's not being cut at all. So we very much thank you for that. However, I do think that there's solid grounds to fund another position for us, because with that, these systems can work even better. And so we modified our ask. I think we're still expecting some raise from the governor, and there's going to be a state employee raise, which will naturally affect the supplement amount from the county as well. But really, in order to provide excellent quality services as the county wishes, another position would be extraordinarily helpful. I would note that other model public defender's offices, like the Public Defender Service in DC, they do this. So at the Public Defender Service of DC, I believe that's one investigator to every two attorneys, and I think it's close to that with social workers. You know, we're so in such bad shape. We have 2 paralegals and 1 mitigation investigator. We use both paralegals, including the county-funded paralegal, as mitigation specialists. So we pledge as much staff as we can, and we even have interns who work on that. So that's most of what I wanted to go through. I would just very quickly, before I ask you if I have any questions, I think you'd be pleased to know some of the ways in which the supplement is helping so much for us. We've had a ton of success recruiting. It is incredible, the applicant pools we get for attorneys and other positions. Attorneys really are choosing us over other really good offices. And I know you'd like to think it's just because of amazing office leadership or something, but it's finances. You know, it's incredible. The cost of living is high around here. And, you know, they want to go somewhere that they're going to be able to do this for a career if they can. So we're getting great applicants, and also we're getting diverse applicants. So not long ago, actually 2 years ago, of all the Northern Virginia public defenders offices, there was only 1 black public defender. That's it. And that's embarrassing. And so the Indigent Defense Commission made a real commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we did as an office. So we've been very intentional about hiring black public defenders. We think lived experience is merit, and it allows our attorneys to have empathy and also build bonds of trust more quickly with their clients. And that is proving to be absolutely true. And we find the same with the support staff and the admins. I believe more than half of our support staff and admins are people of color. And lastly, with respect to the way that the supplement is helping, we've had very little staff attrition compared to a lot of law offices. It's actually been kind of a crisis within indigent defense, and you find offices throughout the state right now that are, I don't know, maybe even 2/3, sometimes even half. Fredericksburg was almost like half staff, the public defender's office. We've only had 1. In fiscal year 2022, we only had 1 departure, and then in this current fiscal year, we've had none. So there's been no turnover. Like, we've just got a solid group of advocates that really like each other and doing great work with each other. And the supplement is a huge reason why I would fully expect, you know, if we had a lower supplement or none at all, that folks would be leaving for other offices, they'd be leaving for private practice. So it's a huge assist. But that's mostly what I wanted to cover. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Appreciate it, Mr. Haywood. Ms. Garvey.
Yeah, thank
Mr.
you.
DeFerranti.
It's great to hear how well your office is doing in these times. That's really good. Just a question. I had the impression you're asking for an additional county-funded position. It sounds like what you're asking for is a social worker, not an attorney, but someone who's sort of a social worker. Is that what you're asking for?
We would be happy with anyone, honestly, but yes. I mean, you know, I think, to be totally frank, we could get more qualified staff that are paid at the attorney level. Like, we're locked in with the Indigent Defense Commission paying by position. We can't, you know, modify what they're paid. And unfortunately, pay for mitigation specialists is still low. It tracks how low pay is for social workers elsewhere. I think that's more of a general problem nationwide. Social workers aren't paid enough. But that's our ask. But if the county were open to funding a social work position, we would be all for it also.
All right, thank you. I'm not sure we could find a social worker because that is a problem, but thank you. Yeah.
Indeed. Mr. DeFerranti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just sort of following up and keeping in mind, we were maybe in a different position on this budget than we were 3 months ago, excuse me. But for me, the center of my thinking as to a hope for any FTE in the whole budget is going to be this position you mentioned and understanding better the mental health docket. Those are the two. And that does not mean that I have a likelihood of getting any of the two, but that is the center. And so it's helpful to hear your sort of theory of the case, and I'm sure that there is a theory with respect to the mental health docket as well. And so I just want to, I'll follow up offline and mindful of time, but that is your description of how it comes is going to be important. And then I just want to understand the mental health docket as well.
Thank you. Mr. Karantonis.
Very short. I had the opportunity to talk with you, so I understand the ask and the center on mental health and the bone diversion issues that you raised because we have a significant increase in demand there. I have just one question for my clarification. So in the critical measures, the number of seriously mentally ill clients identified, the estimate is about 505. And the number of seriously mentally ill clients incarcerated is about 1,000. So do these things correlate, or is just there are two independent measures?
I would say that's probably a data problem. We rely on the jail to provide us stats, and then we essentially calculate based on estimate based on the total number of SMI clients at the jail, how many we would have served. It's super difficult to do that with our database. That's the methodology we've used in recent years. There was when we changed also, we indicated that in the budget, our budget narrative.
Yeah, thank you. I just see there's a steady, increase.
Yeah.
Not a spectacular one in this case, but a steady increase. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Haywood, we really appreciate your time and staying to and through the bitter end. So this will conclude our work session for today. We really very much appreciate all the constitutional offices and 10 in all, I believe, in a little bit over 3.5 hours. We will be back for our next work session a week from today. I believe that's the Department of Environmental Services. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brad.